You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, the Open University of the Airwaves, the College of Knowledge, where there are no tuition fees and where you are positively encouraged to speak back to the teacher. This is the biggest show of its kind in the entire world. More than 1 million viewers of the mother of all talk shows. But are there bigger shows in other worlds? Are there other worlds with intelligent life on them? Is there intelligent life on this world? These are some of the issues we're going to be exploring, if I can make that pun, in the course of the next 3 hours. We'll be talking to a real spaceman. He is, of course, Joe Biden. Not him personally, but Caleb Maupin, who understands him more clearly than virtually anybody else. We'll be talking about another spaceman, an alien being, to some, Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister. He found love in a very, very hopeless place. We'll be talking about that and how it has wrong-footed everyone. It's the mother of all talk shows. 3 hours.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway.
This is Radio Sputnik.
And this is London, but coming to you, of course, all over the world, thanks to the wonders of the internet and SputnikNews.com. In the Washington, D.C. area, you can listen to us in FM on 105.5 FM. Across the United States on AM from Burning City to Burning City. Across the entire world, you can listen to us on the aforementioned SputnikNews.com. But if you are one of the 1 million people who watch as well as listen, then listen to this. If you are watching us on Facebook, please share it right now with all of your friends, all of your contacts. If you are watching us on YouTube, either my YouTube channel or RT's multiple YouTube channels, then please do subscribe. And if you're watching on Instagram, on Twitter, as an ever-growing number of you are watching on your telephones, who knew 5G would work? Not me. Then you are very welcome too. You can watch on my Telegram channel, you can watch on Twitch. All kinds of platforms are now carrying this, the biggest politics show in the world. Get your head around that. And if you knew the budget on which we do it, you'd laugh. I cry, but you would laugh. 1 million people watching a show from across the world. That's us. You're one of them. That proves you are intelligent life. Is there intelligent life in space? And are they sending craft to bother us? We'll be talking about that. How will we identify that intelligent life? Well, we'll be talking to the Regius Professor of Chemistry from the University of Glasgow in my former parliamentary constituency, my first parliamentary constituency, where I would still have been if Tony Blair had not expelled me over the Iraq War and then abolished my constituency just in case. Something to which I may return if I've got time. But first, it would be churlish, and I am not a churl, not to wish every happiness to the newly wedded Mr. and Mrs. Boris Johnson. They found love in a hopeless place. He was with somebody else. In fact, he was married to somebody else and with somebody else. She was with somebody else. But they found love. And those of us, like myself, who have found love, know how precious and important that is. So I wish the couple all the best. I don't agree with hardly anything that they stand for, maybe one or two things, but I am not one of those who thinks that one should automatically hate those with whom one disagrees. If that were the case, a lot of the people watching this show wouldn't be watching it. And that is an important lesson. The purpose of this show is to be a university so that we can all learn from each other. I learn from your calls, from the things that you write to me, not from all of them, of course. And you learn, I hope, either to agree or disagree with what I stand for through this medium of the mother of all talk shows. Speaking of hate, there's a Labour MP or ex-Labour MP. In Scotland, they're almost all ex-Labour MPs. There's only one Labour MP in Scotland now. But when there were more than 50 of us, there was one called Tom Harris. He was a Glasgow MP like me. He seems to think I hated him, though I never did. But since losing office, Tom has become something of a celebrated newspaper columnist. And he damned me with fake praise in his Daily Telegraph column just a day or two ago. If you're behind the paywall, you might be able to read it. If not, I'll summarize it. According to Tom, in a very well-written article, if I hadn't stood for what I actually do stand for, I would have been the leader of the Labour Party and a candidate, therefore, to be Prime Minister of Great Britain. Of course, he misses the point that if I did not stand for what I do stand for, I wouldn't be me. He doesn't go into details about the offensive, his word, things that I do stand for that have stopped me becoming the leader of the Labour Party, so I'll do it for him. He means, I presume, the vehemence with which I opposed the war in Iraq, a war which every sentient being on the planet, and I'm sure anybody that is sentient on any other planet, already now knows was a complete and unmitigated disaster. Unmitigated disaster. Everybody on this planet with two brain cells, two rubbed together, already knows that I was right about the invasion and occupation of Iraq, and Tony Blair, about whom more later, was wrong. Although wrong would be to put it very kindly indeed. Everything I said about the Iraq war turned out to be true, and everything that Tony Blair and George Bush said about the Iraq war turned out to be false, except where it was a deliberate falsehood, a lie. And we all know what I'm talking about. I could do no other than oppose the Iraq war because I knew that they were lying. I could do no other than to oppose the Iraq war because I knew that it would end in the catastrophic swamp of blood and death and suffering that it has ended in. What kind of person would I be if, knowing these things, I had kept stum? Well, one of the things I might be, according to Big Tom, is the leader of the Labour Party. But what would be the point of being the leader of the Labour Party if one had deliberately sublimated that which they knew to be true in the interests of opportunism? Understand this, Tom and others. I don't say and do what I do to be popular. I don't say and do what I do in the hope that it will be profitable. I say and do what I do because I believe it to be right. And of course I've paid a price for that, though not the price they expected me to pay. When Tony Blair expelled me from the Labour Party in 2005, he thought he would never see my face again, never hear my voice again. But actually, he's had to look at my face more since he expelled me than he ever did before he did so. He's had to listen to me. I promised him from the steps of the place where I was being expelled in King's Cross that he would rue the day, the Labour Party would rue the day that they expelled me over the Iraq War. And I've made them rue it twice already, capturing 2 rock-solid Labour parliamentary constituencies, and I intend to do so again. Not because I need a job. I've got more jobs than I can handle now. Not because I need the money. I'm in no need of money. But because I am determined that the things I stand for, opposition to imperialist war, the grand larceny of the country that used to be called Palestine, and the suffering of its millions of citizens scattered to the 4 corners of the earth. It's just as well they can't put them in a spaceship and send them to another world, because if they could, they would. I cannot remain silent about these things because I believe them. And I'm one of these strange political beasts that does things because they believe them. And guess what? Millions of other people believe them also. Millions of us marched against the war in Iraq. Millions of us are marching now in defense of the Palestinian people in Gaza. And when the attention shifts, as it will, as I've long promised you, to Jerusalem itself, to the repeated invasion of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest of shrines in Islam, just yards from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre where Jesus was laid. Trust me, there will be tens, if not hundreds of millions on the march, on the move. Now Netanyahu has just fallen, and you're just about to find out, as Gideon Levy, the greatest living Israeli, told you on this show just a couple of weeks ago, the problem was not Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, the 2 people who are about to take over from Netanyahu are even worse than him. Worse than Netanyahu. Imagine. Who could imagine? But we're about to find out that what I'm saying is true. It wasn't Netanyahu that designed the catastrophe that the Palestinian people have been suffering for more than 100 years now, living under occupation since 1948, since 1967, living as refugees since 1948, since 1967, since 1970, when they were driven out of Jordan. People that I know, people that I love, that live in the most rancid misery. Don't expect me to forget them. Don't expect me to turn my back on them. I'm not that kind of man. I will never turn my back on people that I have promised to their face, eye to eye, that I will use every breath that God gives me to try to come to their side. And I shall continue to do so on all platforms, on radio, on television, in print, in Parliament, on streets, in squares, through loudhailers or microphones, or through this camera reaching more than 1 million viewers, just on this show alone. Now, we'll be talking in the course of tonight to the live wire, Patrick Christy, about how, unbelievably, with one bound, Boris Johnson was free. If you were watching Dominic Cummings, whom the liberal media had told us just a year ago was possibly Mephistopheles himself, Beelzebub, Dominic Cummings, the liar, has been transformed into a liberal icon because he has turned big time against his former friend and boss, Boris Johnson. Well, comfortably, I sit, being against Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson, not in the last year, but always, in every year. I can say that when I listened to Cummings talking, I think it was for 10 hours, I thought that Boris Johnson might be in serious trouble. And here we are on Sunday, and no one is even talking about it. Like the wallpaper gate that went before it, it's an attack that has failed. The Conservative Party is now ahead in the public opinion polls for the 85th poll in a row. And here is one of the most salient features of those opinion polls. More than twice as many working class people are placing their trust in Boris Johnson than in the Labour leader, Keir Starmer. I've been saying here for months, long before there was a by-election in which I would be a candidate, that Keir Starmer is quite the worst leader of an opposition that I have ever seen. And I saw Ian Duncan Smith. I saw Michael Howard. I've seen terrible opposition leaders, but I've never seen one as bad as Keir Starmer. He's so wooden, the birds are trying to nest in him. So wooden, people are hammering in nails to him. And I tell you what, he can't take much more. He can't take much more in terms of by-election defeats, catastrophic public opinion poll ratings. He can't take much more. When a leader is being caught in a pincer movement from the Blairites on the right to the Corbynites on the left, he is not much longer for the leadership of the Labour Party. And I'm going to make a bold prediction to you. Keir Starmer will spend his summer holidays on a beach reflecting that he is now the ex-leader of the Labour Party, the ex-leader of the opposition. And I hope to play some part in bringing that about. Who the Labour Party puts in his place might not be any more politically acceptable to me. Just like Naftali Bennett, who's now about to take the place of Netanyahu. Just because I'm against one doesn't mean I'm for the other. I'll probably not be for the next Labour leader either. But Britain needs an opposition. Parliament needs an opposition. Democracy cannot operate when the opposition is struck deaf, dumb, and blind, represents nothing and nobody, is a cipher rather than an opposition. British democracy cannot afford that. And that's why, for Britain, I say, Keir Starmer must go. Let me launch the poll. Is there intelligent life in A, space, B, Earth, C, nowhere? Who writes this stuff? That's a good one, actually. You can write to me in my Twitter profile. Now, it's my Twitter, by the way, at George Galloway. That's where that poll is. But it's also on Telegram, isn't it? And you can vote there too. Now, I'm supposed to ask you a trivia question, but nobody gave it to me. No, I'm supposed to ask you a trivia question, but nobody gave it to me. That's just the way it goes. Let me take a 60-second break.
Radio Sputnik.
I've just looked at it. Let's take a call. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hi, George. Yeah, I just want to talk about the trans issue that you were speaking about earlier.
Yeah,
I've got
go
a book in front of me by Douglas Murray, and he's got a paragraph here that I'd just like to read out, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was standing on the corner at a quarter.
All right, I'll get him off. He's a nutter. He's a nutter. In the UK, it's 08081 965 522, and in the US, it's +1 844 944 3344.
Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Now, on this day in 1990, France initiated a trade boycott on this British product. Was it A, whiskey, B, black pudding, or C, beef? You can let me know. There are no prizes, but you might be interested in letting me know. Now, Darren Stanton, otherwise known as the human lie detector, is Britain's leading body language expert. Darren began his UK television and media career back in 2010 when he was asked to assess the politicians during the TV live debate for the general election. Prior to this, Darren spent his days investigating and dealing with liars, cheats and criminals as a police officer. Since then, Darren has been a regular on our TV screens and on radio, with appearances on some of Britain's biggest shows, including my own shows, Sputnik and the mother of all talk shows. Now, Darren is going to join me now to talk about Dominic Cummings. Darren, you must have watched, because the whole country was watching. You must have watched, if not all, then parts of Dominic Cummings' epic parliamentary performance this week. What did you think of his performance? What did his body language say to you?
Yeah, I watched it obviously quite a lot of times. It was fascinating because we saw a total reversal. We saw a total change from when we saw the famous Rose Garden press conference.
A year ago, yes.
Yes.
What a difference a year can make. Then he was a demon. Now he's the hero of the liberal classes.
It's just intrigued me how suddenly everyone's done a U-turn now, or appears to have done a U-turn, and said that, you know, he's now this paragon of virtue that's come out and been totally honest and stuff. But again, going back to last year, there was a lot of the things that, you know, I wasn't happy about in terms of the way he conveyed it. But For the launch part of this press conference last week, we saw a lot of gestures which were consistent with him being being honest. Now, there's two schools of thought on this. Either he's convinced himself of what the truth is, in which case the body follows what we believe, or indeed, he's been completely truthful. But it's been fascinating to see the change in terms of how he conveys himself.
Tell us what he did, what he manifested that made you think he might very well be telling the truth.
Well, when someone's being basically afraid of being discovered in quite a big lie, the biggest fear is the consequence. And what people tend to do, no matter how well they're trained, and again, as you know, I've assessed some of the biggest celebrities and politicians, that we know. And last year, he was very, very unanimated. So he was almost withdrawn into himself in terms of his posture. He wasn't making many hand gestures. His blink rate was kind of double or triple, which are all what I call red flags. Now, with the press conference last week, we saw lots of what we call open palm gesture, which psychologically saying, I have no weapons. It's almost like saying I'm being truthful. His blink rate didn't spike on certain parts of where I would have expected it to do so. In terms of the way that he conveyed himself verbally, people tend to have quite a high pitch, or their voice cracks from the anxiety. And I didn't pick up too much of that with him. So again, he's either convinced himself of a backstory to such a high degree that he believes it now, or he's being truthful.
He spoke for such a long time. I mean, even I would struggle with a 10-hour parliamentary statement. It was a committee that was grilling him. Did he seem confident in what he was saying? Did he seem at all fearful?
Yes, a great question, George. And there's a number of key things that I picked up on. And again, if many of us imagine, 7 hours, it's a bit of an ordeal. But he was consistent in his behaviour throughout that period. But there are a couple of interesting things that he tended to make the gesture where he put his hands on his head at certain times. And that's what we call a self-reassurance gesture, like a self-hug. What do you mean?
What do you mean on his head? On top of his head or behind?
On top of his head, yeah. Sometimes they might see a child, or somebody might do it in frustration, where they put their hands on the head. Yeah. Now, he did that at a number of significant points where he realised that what he was saying was going to be quite damning for the PM and Hancock. So obviously when he said about the lies, if people watch that back, he makes quite a number of these gestures where he self-touches his face and his head. And then
did you find that convincing?
I did, to be fair, because that's not a gesture that he's made before. Although we've not seen him give a lot of press conferences, he's not made that gesture before. So, for example, anything that's new or different, or something that someone doesn't normally do, that flags up to me. So that did seem quite convincing, the fact that he realised the kind of importance and the impact of what he was saying.
Well, I mean, on the face of it, it could scarcely have been more important. He was effectively accusing his former boss, the Prime Minister of Britain, of having caused the deaths of thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people unnecessarily. Now, that is verging on an allegation of criminal negligence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when he was asked the question, I think was it Jeremy Hunt that asked the question about, are you not I can't remember the phrase he used, but essentially he was asking Cummins, are you not disgusted almost that you didn't pull the ripcord long before that? And he pretty much said, yes, I am. And then when he was also pushed on, have you got any evidence that you've said that Matt Hancock has been lying? He said, yeah, I've got WhatsApp messages, I've got emails available. I'll make that available to the committee. So that would have been a key point at which I would have expected someone that's been less than honest to have begun to stutter or
to begin to show it.
Yes, but he didn't. It was cool as a cucumber, to be honest, George.
Now, what about the moment where he apologised for his own shortcomings, if you'll forgive the pun? He wasn't able to. It would have been scarcely credible, considering how central he was to the government's coronavirus response, he didn't spare himself in the criticism, did he? Was that persuasive?
I think it was. I mean, he made no attempts to sort of deflect any of the questions or, like you say, to because normally what I find when I assess politicians is they will distance themselves. They will tend to use phraseology like, yes, well, those people, or when that happened, they'll sort of create this disassociation as if it's a separate issue. So, for example, the famous expression with Clinton, I didn't have relations with that woman, even though we knew, the truth. So we didn't see any of that sort of language or behaviour.
Depends what you mean by relations, doesn't it? He was relying on a very rather arcane and obscure point about what relations would constitute. Not that Cummings would be involved in any of that stuff. Did he flag in any way? Did he keep it up right to the end?
So another key thing which I thought was interesting was when he was quizzed about the whole debacle about going up to Durham. I mean, far better than me in terms of what security would have been available for him had there been credible threats. But I think he wasn't giving us the whole story on that, because we see what we call, it's almost like a reverse horseshoe. So if you imagine sort of like you make an expression of indifference almost, but it's like an upside down horseshoe with your mouth. And that is not a deceptive tell, but it's something that kind of flags to me that maybe he couldn't give the whole truth, but I think he was certainly holding something back. I don't think we've been told the full story on the whole situation with regards to breaking the corona rules.
He could, of course, be a psychopathic liar, and this could, of course, all be about the fact that he fell out of love with Boris Johnson, or Boris fell out of love with him. Did you see any signs that might be the explanation?
I didn't see any signs that he's got sort of sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies, but you're quite right. I mean, the people that tend to be able to beat these kind of analysis and polygraph, as you know, are people with personality disorders and people with psychopathic sort of tendencies that can convince themselves of whatever reality they like, and indeed they will come over completely credible. So yeah,
Well, you see, I ask because that's exactly what he was being described as just a year ago by, in many cases, the very same correspondents that are now behaving as if he has brought down on tablets of stone from the Mount the whole and unvarnished truth. I'm thinking of the Sky News lady, Beth Rigby, who was Cummings' chief persecutor a year ago. And do you remember those scenes outside his house? They were treating him as if he was a criminal. Indeed, they were treating him as a criminal just a year ago. And now everything has completely transformed. So I suppose it's not really your place to answer, but if you've got an answer, I'd love to hear it. Which was the real Dominic Cummings? Last year's model or this year's model?
It's really interesting you bring up that journalist, because I know she's been quite forthright, and again, I looked at all the daily briefings throughout the whole year. Interesting at the time, no one would take my analysis because there was quite a lot of things that were flagging up during the daily briefings. But my personal gut instinct, George, is that last year is the true Cummings, if you want my honest opinion. Okay,
so no stammering, the reverse horseshoe, the blink rate, the hands on the head. It sounds like a bravura performance. I suppose the acid test was it a performance or was it the real deal? Was it the real thing? I thought when I read and heard the headlines that he had put Boris Johnson in a very, very difficult place. But it's only Sunday, and Boris is celebrating his nuptials, and everyone's forgotten about Dominic Cummings. I wonder if this was a good day for Boris to bury that bad news.
Do you know what? Honestly, that is exactly. I was interviewed a few other times yesterday, and I kind of said the same thing. It just seems quite strategic. I don't know, in a way, because I'm an old cynic, so I think it seems a bit strategic that all of these things have happened in the space of a few days. And like you say, it does seem a good day to bury bad news, doesn't it?
And it's buried. I mean, if that was the intention, it's worked. They say that Boris is a fool, but he's the wisest fool in Christendom. Thanks, Darren Stanton, the human lie detector. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Now, let me give you the telephone number, which is, remember, it's free now. It's toll-free from the United States. It's entirely free from the United Kingdom. So if you're in the UK, it's 8081 965522. That's 8081. Sorry, I wish this could be written properly. 08081 965 522. That's 08081 965 522. If you're in the United States, it's +1 844 944 3344. And you can tweet us, of course, at George Galloway, at RT UK News. Let's take... Oh, there's another trivia. Well, I better give you the answer to the first one. On this day in 1990, France initiated a trade boycott on which British product? Was it A, whiskey, B, black pudding, or C, beef? Well, I knew that it wouldn't be black pudding because I don't think the French palate could quite take black pudding. And I kind of guessed it wouldn't be whiskey because with all the wine and things that they've got and their own spirits, do they drink that much whiskey? So I was sure it would be beef. And beef it was. So here's the second question. In this week in 1957, a famous US playwright was found guilty of contempt by Congress for refusing to name communists. Was it Arthur Miller, Eugene O'Neill, or Tennessee Williams? I'll give you an answer to that after the break. 60 seconds.
Radio Sputnik.
Gosh darn, how do you get this thing to work? Is it that one? Is it this one here? Gosh, was this thing built in America? Jeez. Kamala, would you get in here? I can't get the, gosh darn wireless to work.
You know I can't answer questions, Joe, when I'm laughing.
I'm trying to, listen to that Scottish guy on the wireless, the Galloway fella.
Oh, Joe, you're so funny.
I've been pressing this red button on and off and on and off. Heck, I can't get it to work. Hello, Biden residence.
Mr. President, be advised, we have executed the airstrike on Syria. Confirmed.
That's just great. How long until it gets delivered? I'm starving.
Sputnik has been launched to give you a closer look at everything happening in the world.
Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
The mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Which famous US playwright was found guilty in 1957 of contempt of Congress for refusing to name names in front of the committee? Was it Arthur Miller, Eugene O'Neill, or Tennessee Williams? The answer is the great Arthur Miller. Now, there wasn't much sign of intelligent life in the Congress of the United States in 1957. But the Congress, and indeed the former President of the United States, Barack Obama, are increasingly hinting, more than hinting, that there is big news in their possession about the existence of unidentified flying objects. They haven't gone as far as to say that these objects were evidence of extraterrestrial life, but it's quite difficult to understand what they would be if not that. You probably didn't know, I was sitting in Parliament for decades and not knowing, that the Ministry of Defence in Britain, as in the United States, had a UFO department. And the man that ran it was Nick Pope, who joins me now. Nick, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. It's always a pleasure. The proximate reason for asking you on now again is because Barack Obama seemed to indicate that he knew things he hasn't told us yet. Was that your impression?
Yes, it was, absolutely. And he's not the only one. Former Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, talked about this and said that there was satellite imagery of UFOs and many, many more pilot sightings than have been made public. We have two former CIA directors, James Woolsey and John Brennan, talking about it. And now, of course, we're going to get this report. Think of it really as a proper intelligence assessment of the UFO phenomenon, going from Director of National Intelligence to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Finally, they are waking up and treating this as the defense and national security issue. Those of us who've looked at it in government have always known it to be. Although if it had hostile intent, it would be curtains, wouldn't it? There's not much we could do about presumably the military power of an extraterrestrial force which had the superior technology to be able to visit us at will. So we might as well raise the white flag. Yes, I don't think anyone's advocating getting into a shooting war here. And of course, we don't even really know for sure that this is extraterrestrial, though, interestingly, it's certainly not been ruled out. And there's certainly, my understanding is that there's a faction within the US government that believes this to be extraterrestrial. But in the first instance, we need to find out, for sure what we're dealing with, because these things have been seen in close proximity to USS Nimitz, for example, the USS Princeton. So a couple of aircraft carriers, several destroyers. We need to know, is it our own technology? Is it a foreign adversary? Or is it something else, possibly even something extraterrestrial? And that's what we hope we're going to get clarity on in the next month or so. Do these things ever visit Burundi or Burkina Faso? Or are they only found buzzing around American and British naval assets? I ask because it is quite possible that these are experimental weapons, either Western weapons or weapons that are being developed by others, isn't it? Yes, it is. And that's very much one of the theories being looked at fairly hard here. Secret prototype aircraft, missiles and drones. Interestingly, Senator Marco Rubio, who was acting chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, said, I would rather this is extraterrestrial than, say, Russia or China, because if that's the case, the United States has been left standing. But to answer your original question, we don't know, because we don't get those reports. And that's one of the things. We think that UFOs are a global phenomenon, but we really only have good data where we have things like satellite coverage, where we have jets flying with forward-looking infrared cameras, where we have the space tracking radar systems at the ballistic missile early warning centers, for example, looking. But it's a good question and one we need more clarity on, I think. What kind of things are you hearing? Because your ear is very close to the ground on these matters, and you're currently, I think, in the United States.
What sort of things do you think might be in these reports?
Well, what I'm hearing is, frankly, they're getting themselves into something of a mess over this, and that there's what you might call a skeptic versus believer dogfight raging at the heart of the US military intelligence community about what we're dealing with here, with factions struggling for control of the narrative here. I think what we are likely to get, and this report is due by late June, but I'm hearing leaks that it's likely to be delayed, that we'll get a holding report, that of course there are, 18 different parts of the US intelligence community. The people doing this study and writing this report, their first challenge is to get FaceTime with the people in the know. What active programs are there in the intelligence community? What historical data? It's a big challenge. They've hit some roadblocks, so many roadblocks that the DOD has called in the Office of the Inspector General. There have been complaints about this. There have been allegations of non-cooperation. It's, as I say, it's a mess.
Now, what did President Obama say? I didn't see his lips move, so I've only read reports of it. What did he say that caused this, well, I think we can call it a shockwave?
Well, he was asked in relation to all these recent sightings involving the US Navy and the upcoming report to Congress, what do you know? And he said, look, there are a lot of fairly far out rumors circulating about, we've got crashed spaceships hidden away in hangars, things being studied in laboratories. He said he asked when he was president, but didn't get any sort of confirmation of that. But he said, yes, I am aware that we are seeing, whether it's visually from pilots or whether it's things like radar operators tracking them, he said, we are seeing these things in our airspace performing extraordinary speeds and maneuvers and accelerations and other things, and we don't know what we're dealing with. So he didn't go quite as far as to say that it's definitely extraterrestrial, but my goodness, it was a sort of heavy hint that it might be more than just aircraft lights and weather balloons.
How hypersonic are these movements that have been seen? I mean, are they completely of a different dimension?
Some of them are, but it's on a spectrum. Some of the speeds are not, frankly, compared to our own, that remarkable, but others are, and there have been one or two fairly highly classified reports suggesting things which would almost imply a new physics. And what's for sure, of course, is that what's been publicly released here is just the tip of the iceberg, and the US military intelligence community is sitting on data, some of it classified top secret, that it absolutely, and perhaps understandably, is not sharing. And it's those data that would answer your question, because I think that's where the really insane sounding speeds and accelerations are recorded.
Well, that takes us back to the Marco Rubio point, that if something so hypersonic that it almost envisages a new physics is a weapon or a platform for a weapon in the hands of a country other than the United States, I expect the United States will be praying that it's men from Mars or further beyond.
Yes, very much so. And former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who was instrumental in setting up an earlier Pentagon study into all this, wrote to the Deputy Defense Secretary in one of the few letters about this that has been released into the public domain and authenticated by the Pentagon. And he talked about, and I'm paraphrasing, but the catastrophic damage to the national interest of the United States if this technology, whatever it was in the hands of a foreign adversary.
Extraordinary. Now, you did this for a living. You're probably still doing it for a living, but not for the MOD. You did this in Britain. What were the most amazing things that crossed your desk when you were in Whitehall?
Well, we received about 200 or 300 reports each year, and while most of them were misidentifications, we did have some which were quite extraordinary. And I remember a case from 1993 where we had a wave of sightings over the UK for a period of about 6 hours, huge triangular-shaped craft flying directly over 2 military air bases, accelerating away at phenomenal speed from a virtual hover. And of course, and you'll appreciate this, George, or maybe not, as the case may be, we routinely told Parliament, the media and the public that these things were of very little defense interest. But behind closed doors, some of us were seriously concerned. And that's why, I don't know if you saw, I think it was yesterday in the Telegraph, a senior defense source said it's time to reopen these Ministry of Defense investigations. And he or she said, we're tracking what the US is doing now with this report. We'll keep an eye on what they say. And if we need to re-engage on this, obviously we'll do so. But absolutely, we want to know what's going on in our airspace. This is no longer a fringe topic or conspiracy theory. It's mainstream defense and national security issue.
Now, I don't know if you do philosophical questions, but if you do, let me try it. What does your gut tell you as a man that's worked in this field now for so many years, decades, in fact? Do you think that some of this is extraterrestrial?
I'm convinced there's life out there in the universe, and I think we're very close to finding it through a whole range of scientific means. Whether we're being visited or not, I'm not sure. I'd like to think so. I guess like Fox Mulder, I want to believe. Aliens would certainly be the most interesting of all the potential solutions to what we're dealing with here. And yeah, if that's what we're dealing with, as we often used to say at the MOD, the skeptics have to be right every time, but the believers only need to be right once. And we are in, if that's true, the most game-changing, paradigm-busting situation imaginable. And I hope that's what we're dealing with, and I hope we'll get some answers on this sooner rather than later. Although, of course, this report going to Congress must be unclassified, but it can have a classified annex. So as ever, I'm afraid the media and the public might not get to see the good stuff.
Unlike us, of course, so far they've come in peace, if they are they.
Yes, that's my fervent hope, is that they're coming here not as conquerors or exterminators, but as scientists, as biologists, as anthropologists, and that they're fascinated by the biodiversity on this amazing planet on which we live, and hoping perhaps that we don't blow ourselves up.
I hope they enjoyed the Champions League final last night. That would have been worth watching even if you were in Mars. Thank you very much indeed, Nick Pope, as always, for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Fascinating subject, this. Give me your thoughts on it, will you? 08081 965522. That's 08081 965522. Free to call me. And in the US, +1 844 944 3344. Or tweet me at George Galloway at RT UK News. Malcolm Jones says on the poll, which is, by the way, doing great business. A, space. Is there intelligent life in space? 42%. In Earth, on Earth, 25%. Down 1. And nowhere at all, 33%. Let me have your... It's a short poll, this one. It will close in about 6 minutes. But Malcolm Jones says, Westminster is devoid of intelligence, compassion, and morality. And that's a good one. And Martin Taylor says, what do the Iraqi people say, though? Are they better now than under Saddam? Martin, you've obviously been away for a long stretch, if you can even ask that question. Pat Brannigan says, all wars are ultimately about the same thing, land and resources. They pretend all sorts of noble causes, but it just comes down to I want. And John Cumberbatch, Keir is doing what he was placed to do. Place the red car onto its axle, stand until the blue car is losing its torque, but don't worry, Team Neolib will have the red team ready. Quite well expressed. Have I got a call? Give it to me then. Wayne in Cheshire on UFOs. Wayne, welcome.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I've been researching this for 30 plus years, the phenomena.
Okay.
We need to...
When you say researching it, do you mean on the internet?
Mostly, yeah.
Okay. You've not studied at a university or anything like that?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, because the information from the university wouldn't help you anyway.
All right. Go ahead.
We need to acclimatise the public for the introduction of extraterrestrials, because come to the conclusion at this point that we're at a crossroads of human history at the moment. We have technology to wipe out ourselves and the Earth itself, but we don't have the wisdom to control it. We need extraterrestrials to help guide us through this juncture. If they're going to come, they are going to come soon, because I believe inevitably we will kill ourselves either through nuclear, biological, or technological means. I also believe this has happened many times over the millennia.
I was going to ask you that. I mean, if they're here now, what's to say that they haven't been before?
I believe the Earth is a nursery where species such as ourselves get to a technological point as we are at the moment. We get helped, or we either survive or we don't, and then basically we leave and it starts all over again. The evidence of that is some mines across the world are finding similar things to mobile phones in rocks and in coal. That's the evidence of that it's happened all before.
I've never seen any evidence of that, Wayne. Where did you see that?
Yeah. There is some Russian coal mines. There is some evidence. But also, if you think about it, this is what we would do if we were a spacefaring community. We would help other species through their turbulent times. And like I say, if they are going to come, it's over the next number of years, because you know, and I'm sure deep down you understand, we will not make it through. Don't get me wrong, I believe there is a God which rules the whole universe, but I also believe in extraterrestrials, and one or the other is going to have to come to help us from ourselves.
Well, you took the question literally right out of my mouth. I don't have a problem with this as a religious believer. I believe that God is the God of the worlds, all the worlds, and this is all God's creation. But does it pose moral and religious questions from your standpoint?
No, it doesn't, because I've also studied many religions, and I've come to the conclusion, as I said before, for me, God is an intelligent entity which controls the whole universe, but the religions themselves have been, the books, example, have been rewritten so many times. They have been bastardized and used as a controlling mechanism for humanity.
Now, finally, before I go to the news, have you ever seen any of these phenomena?
I have, yes.
Tell me.
You might laugh, but it's true for me. It's my truth. I have seen energy entities. I saw two, and that I was not getting an emotional feeling from. One of them was love. The other one was hate. One looked like a massive jellyfish. The other one looked like a massive centipede. Now, you laugh, but that's my truth.
Well, you had me up to that point. Now I just think you're stark raving mad. But thanks, Wayne, in Cheshire. It's time, definitely more than time for the news with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has married his fiancée Carrie Symonds in a secretly planned wedding at Westminster Cathedral. He's the first Prime Minister to get married while in office in nearly 200 years. The marriage took place in a small ceremony on Saturday afternoon, a Downing Street spokesman said. The spokesman added that the couple would celebrate again with family and friends next summer, with their honeymoon also delayed until then. 30 guests were invited to the ceremony at short notice, the maximum number of attendees allowed under COVID restrictions in England. A small number of church officials were involved in preparations for the Catholic ceremony. Although Johnson has been married twice before, the Roman Catholic Church can allow divorcees to remarry if previous marriages were outside of the Roman Catholic Church. The head of NHS providers in England has said very few COVID patients in hospital have received 2 coronavirus jabs, showing the vaccines provide very high levels of protection. Chris Hobson said patients now tended to be younger, meaning there was a lower need for critical care. But he said it was incredibly striking how busy hospitals were as they deal with backlogs of non-COVID cases. Vaccines Minister Nadine Zahawi has confirmed that the government is considering making coronavirus vaccines compulsory for NHS staff. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to hold on to power by attempting to dissuade his opponents from forming a government. Centrist party leader Yair Lapid has until Wednesday to build a coalition. Media reports from Israel say he is close to reaching a deal with the ultra-nationalist leader Naftali Bennett. Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving prime minister, fell short of a decisive majority at a general election in March, the 4th in 2 years. Lapid could be close to reaching a deal, according to analysts. Netanyahu, who is on trial for fraud, has been in power for 12 years and has dominated Israeli politics for a generation. He was given the first chance at forming a government, but was unable to secure the coalition partners needed. Lapid's Yesh Atid party came second to Netanyahu's right-wing Likud in the last election and was given until June 2nd to build a coalition. President Emmanuel Macron has warned that France would withdraw troops from Mali if political instability there leads to greater Islamist radicalisation. It follows a second coup in 9 months in the West African nation. Macron warned of the risk of Mali moving towards greater Islamist influence. France has over 5,000 troops in the Sahel region, which has been a front line in the war against Islamist militancy. French troops have been supporting forces in Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Burkina and Faso and Chad to battle militants in the Sahel region since 2013. Macron told Le Journal du Dimanche newspaper that he had told regional leaders that France would not support countries where there was no democratic legitimacy or transition, and that France had no intention of keeping troops in Africa forever. A new national flagship is to be commissioned by the British government in a bid to boost trade and industry globally, the Prime Minister has said. The vessel will be the successor to the Royal Yacht Britannia, which was retired in 1997. The government plans to build the ship in the UK at a reported cost of £200 million. Labour said the government must demonstrate clearly how the ship is expected to boost trade, jobs and growth. The name for the new flagship is yet to be announced, but there is suggestions that it will be named after the Duke of Edinburgh, who helped design Britannia. The vessel would be used to promote British interests around the world, including hosting trade fairs and diplomatic meetings, as the UK seeks to build links and boost exports following Brexit. Downing Street said costs for the construction and operation of the ship would be confirmed after the tendering process concluded. Construction is set to start as early as next year, with the ship expected to enter the service within the next 4 years. At least 2 people have died and more than 20 were wounded in a shooting outside a concert hall in Florida. The shooting took place between midnight and 1 a.m. local time in Haley City, north of Miami. 3 people climbed out of a white car with assault rifles and handguns and started firing indiscriminately into the crowd, Police Director Alfredo Ramirez told reporters. At least one of the wounded is in a critical condition, police said. It comes just days after an employee at a train yard killed 9 people on the other side of the country in California. Swiss motorcycle racer Jason de Pasquier has died in hospital from injuries sustained in a crash at the Italian Grand Prix. The 19-year-old fell at the Mugello circuit during qualifying in the Moto3 class on Saturday. He was involved in a serious multi-rider incident and was airlifted to a hospital in Florence. Officials announced today that he had died. And finally, a man in Washington, the USA, has dreamed his whole life of finding a raw diamond to create a one-of-a-kind engagement ring for his future partner, but he didn't know that it would actually become a reality. Christian Leiden said that the idea of mining his own gems for an engagement ring was planted in his head since school, but he had no idea how to accomplish it. Later, when Leiden's co-worker told him about Crater of Diamonds State Park in Arkansas 3 years ago, he believed his dream could be a reality. He'd been dating his girlfriend Desiree for 2 years. He watched videos from those who were successful in finding diamonds at the park and tried to get as much information as he could before deciding to plan his trip. His friend Josh decided to join him. On the 3rd day in the park, after 2 unsuccessful ones, they decided to try a different approach and just mine the surface of the gravel. It was towards the end of the day, Leiden said. It was the last 2 carts and we started throwing materials in the screens, he said. When he shook the screen, there on top was a yellow diamond weighing over 2 carats. The day after Leiden arrived back, he and his girlfriend went mushroom hunting during their walk in the woods and pulled out the diamond ring and proposed. She said yes. And that's the latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jamie Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Now, Tony Gannon asks, as if I would know, George, are these UFOs actually Russian and Chinese hypersonic drones? Well, Marco Rubio hopes not. He'd rather they were coming from Mars. And a long-time correspondent of mine, a very intelligent lady by the name of Diane, says, Cummings was telling the truth this week. Many of us who'd followed the events, strategies, etc., that he described, we had witnessed as they happened and knew of completely at the time. I agree with Jonathan Cook, whose conclusions on Cummings answering in front of the parliamentary committee were identical to mine. He said that Cummings is trying to replace the inefficient, corrupt Johnson and Hancock with the more efficient and corrupt Gove and Sunak. The kind of systems, global and corporate capitalism, that Cummings espouses, as do Sunak and Gove, is not nice. It's the ultimate in neoliberal, backed by neocon war. This was actually obvious to see for those that would in Cummings' lengthy submission last week. Cummings may genuinely have some regret for his part in wantonly, cavalierly, and fully consciously causing thousands of unnecessary British deaths. But it looks as though he, Johnson, Hancock, and Sunak, Gove, and the rest will get away with it for now. Both Sunak and Gove are in cabinet and did nothing to stop Johnson and Hancock's strategies or the lack of them. Much else in that email, but too long to read out. Someone sent me a picture of a 100-year-old iPhone in the grave of a woman buried in Russian Atlantis. It didn't convince me, I've got to say. Now, Lee Cronin is not just the professor of chemistry at the University of Glasgow. He's working on a new tool to help humans find alien life in the universe. He is the Regius Professor, as I say, and his team have come up with the assembly theory, which is a new way of quantifying molecular complexity, which can be used to determine if a molecule required a biological system to create it, or if it happened by chance. They're working with NASA to make new life detection instruments which could be sent on missions into space to trace alien life. Now, he thinks that there is life on Mars, but that it will be boring. Amazing. He joins me now, Professor Lee Cronin, Professor of Chemistry at the University of Glasgow. That was a bit of a letdown. The good news is there's life on Mars. The bad news is it's boring. What do you mean, Professor?
Hi, good evening. Pleasure to be with you. Okay, so Mars is very close to Earth, and it would seem that probably Mars was very similar to Earth when it was a different place, so it was more what we call habitable. So I was kind of making a flip comment. Of course, we could find life on Mars, any life or evidence of life. It would be amazing. The first question is there life on Mars? And if the life we find on Mars is similar to life we find on Earth, like made up of DNA and proteins and the same chemistry we find, and then that will be what I mean by boring, but not really. It still will be amazing.
It will be amazing, but I get your point. But your detection system can find life that didn't require biology to create it. What do you mean by that dichotomy?
So what I mean is, so if we go to Mars and we try and just look for Earth-like life, if we don't find Earth-like life, then we might miss other life. What our approach does is to say, well, look, let's not go with any idea of what the life looks like. So like biology on Earth, let's try and work out if we can be as open-minded as possible for alien biology. And so what our technique will do will allow you to find not only Earth life, but any life, no matter what the chemistry, because it only looks for the evidence of complexity. And so that's how we built the technique, and we verified the technique in the laboratory over the past few years, and we're getting ready to kind of go further afield.
Well, that's great news for the University of Glasgow that I represented for quite a long time in Parliament. I'm very glad to hear that. Who are the customers for this? NASA? Anyone else? You making it available to other spacefaring nations? China? Russia?
So I think at the moment, the only I've just published it in an open access journal, so anyone can look at it. I'm working with NASA. They helped develop that approach with me, and the nice thing for it is the customer isn't just going to be space faring nations. Actually, this approach can be used to discover new drugs as well in the laboratory and also make new life forms. So we're using this approach in the lab practically to, say, search for new antibiotics and new drugs. I could explain why in a minute, it's a bit weird, but it actually works quite nicely. And we're going to go elsewhere. And I think where I really want to go is to the outer solar system or to somewhere really quite strange like Venus. To look for weird life around us.
I'm an interested layman, amateur in this, but it seems to me a decently workable thesis that Mars was once a planet, perhaps quite like ours, but that it died. A melancholy inference from that is that that's what will happen to us. Am I widely off the mark there?
No, not really. We just don't. So Mars was a bit smaller, so Mars wasn't able to hang on for its atmosphere for as long. And so because Mars was smaller and it didn't have a magnetic field, so what happens on Earth? We've got this magnetic field that keeps our atmosphere with us. So that's why Earth has survived longer. So there's lots of reasons to expect and hope that Earth will go for much longer than Mars. It already has. But what's really exciting is Mars was habitable before Earth. So probably the chemistry for life on Earth got cooking on Mars, almost like the aperitif for life on Earth could have started on Mars and actually got sent to Earth on a meteorite, and in fact we're all Martians. And by one of the reasons why going to Mars to have a look is we found a new type of life form that's different to life on Earth but related. We might find that we are actually the great grandchildren of life on Mars, but don't worry, we might survive longer because we can keep our atmosphere for longer, as long as we don't screw things up through global warming or nuclear disaster and other things like that.
Indeed so. The sociology lags behind your brilliant technology, that's for sure. I'm fascinated by your wish to go farther. It'll, of course, take a very long time to go to Venus. How realistic is it that craft can you land on Venus?
Yes, so actually Venus is a lot closer. Venus is one of the cheapest places to get to, but to land now I'm not entirely sure if my memory serves me correctly, but I believe that the Russians landed 2 vehicles on Venus about 30 or 40 years ago. So it is possible to land there, but they don't survive for very long. I think the US has already also been there. So going to Venus will be one option. But what's really exciting is to go to other places in the solar system where there is water and carbon like on Earth. And one such place is Europa. And there's another place where I think is interesting called Titan. And actually in a few years, NASA is going to send a nuclear-powered drone to Titan that has a special nose on it. And the nose that it has will you be able to use my technique. So we might, within the next 10 years, be able to find weird life on Titan using this nuclear-powered drone with this special nose.
And of course, you're talking about our solar system. There are very many solar systems. Could there be more than one universe?
Well, I think so. I think there could be more than one habitable solar system in our universe. I'm not sure about. Depends how you define the universe. But to kind of say one thing extra, the technique we've approached is very good if you can go and collect the molecules. But we have developed a new technique where you can basically use a telescope to look for complex molecules from very long distances. So we might be even able to find complex molecules in other solar systems in our current universe in the next 20 or 30 years by extending this technique, because it works in a thing called the infrared very well. So I'm super excited about that. I'm pretty sure we will find life if it's out there. We just have to be really open-minded when we go and look.
Well, I had Nick Pope, the MOD specialist in UFOs. It could be that whilst we are so far vainly trying to find them, they've already found us. Does your thought process intersect with that point in any way?
Yes and no. There is life elsewhere in the universe. Is there any evidence that UFOs are visiting Earth right now? Not really. There are anomalies that people are excited about. But I think actually the UFO phenomena is a bit, I think we should pay attention to, not because there are UFOs visiting us, but how people will react when we find life elsewhere in the universe. Culturally, this is going to be really powerful. And I think maybe the reason why people want to believe in UFOs is this wish to know, are we alone in the universe? What are we doing here? What is life all about? And what is the future for life on Earth? So I don't want to ridicule those people who believe in UFOs, but it is a belief. There is no evidence.
I don't know if you're aware, because you're obviously deeply immersed in your own work, but President Obama made some comments recently, and there is a report going to Congress at the end of June, which will apparently reveal either the existence of phenomena mind-bending in its sophistication. Marco Rubio, the senator, is hoping that it's extraterrestrial, because if it isn't, it means that Russia and China have got some pretty spectacular kit out there. It is becoming a bit more mainstream, Professor.
No. So I'll tell you what's going on. I'm aware of all this work very well. The US Navy and the Pentagon want a little bit of publicity for funding. Okay, the anomalies we have seen are advanced image anomalies that can be explained with a little bit of critical thinking, looking at flaring on the surface of the CCD. Believe me, I'm the first to be there and want to find aliens. Just think critically for a second. If aliens have advanced technology and they're able to fly to us, why have we not seen any more information? Why is it just the US Navy? Let's think a bit more. Why is it the quality of the photographs and the information we're seeing not improving? And so I think what Obama is going to say and the Pentagon say is there are really interesting anomalies we're picking up with our equipment right now. Let's have a look and update it. That is not the same thing as saying they're UFOs. I think I try to be as humble as possible about this, about the possibility. Of course, aliens could be visiting us. Have we seen any compelling evidence? No. But that doesn't mean that the US State Department, the Pentagon, and so on are not going to release some very interesting information. But I wouldn't necessarily have a wager with you, but I'm pretty sure that it's going to be very exciting to look at the anomalies, but they are nevertheless anomalies in our atmosphere. And Russia and China do have sophisticated tech, so do the US, so do other places. But, you know, I'm also going to be very interested to see what is declassified, because they've really pumped us all up, haven't they?
Well, they pumped me up. Let's talk again, perhaps, after the report comes out. And the very best of luck with your, I was going to say groundbreaking work, but it's far more than that. It is cosmically important. Professor, proud of you. Lee Cronin, Professor of Chemistry at the University of Glasgow. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Now, here's poll number 2. For Carrie Simon's marriage to Boris Johnson, is it A, congratulations, B, she got lucky, or C, a whitewash, a means of burying bad news? You can, of course, vote on that. Now, apparently, I've got a question that I can ask you, but I have misplaced it, so you'll have to wait. On the 2nd of June, 1953, people crowded round this new fancy device called television to watch what? Now, that's 1953, right? That's just a year and a month before I was born, and I'm not Methuselah. On the 2nd of June in 1953, people crowded round this new device called television to watch what? A, the Queen's coronation, B, the Cup final, or C, Val Doonican. Could be Val. Now, on Dominic Cummings, Frank Hayes says, George, it's easy to get rid of Keir, but who would replace him? Momentum and centrist Blairites cannot and will never be reconciled. Well, maybe the Labour Party will divide. Maybe it should divide. But what Britain can't afford, Frank, is to have no opposition. On this whole COVID thing, for example, Keir Starmer has tail-ended Boris Johnson every step of the way. That's why he cannot exploit the failings, self-evident failings of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, because he supported them every step of the way. Keir Starmer believes in nothing, and nobody believes in Keir Starmer. John Cumberbatch is back. Dominic Cummings is spreading the blame. He's defusing the situation. Cummings knows the tricks and knows he's still part of the team. Not so sure about that. I'll take more of your calls after the break.
Radio Sputnik.
Call me. Come and have a go. If you think you're hard enough, don't bring up a false name. Come on air. Call me and let's have this matter out.
Let's get ready to rumble!
How have you not the nerve to tell people to Brexit if you're not telling them the repercussions?
That's 2016's argument, Michael. I'm no longer arguing with you about the merits of Brexit. I'm arguing with you about democracy, about the right of the majority to have their decision, their vote implemented.
This match will get red hot.
Not have a referendum.
No,
let them have a referendum. Let them sort it out amongst themselves.
I want a referendum. Robert, I want a referendum. Let me put that in capital letters. If you think this year, which is shaping up already to be an annus miserabilis for the SNP, if you think this is your year, go ahead. Come on. Let's have it out.
It's on.
But no, George, it's not as simple as that, right? Have you seen the documentary about Cambridge Analytica and people who work there? Have you looked at the global
know nothing about
impact?
them. I'm not interested in them.
Precisely. But
I'm not
because you don't know about them.
I'm not interested in them, Bruce, because it's all a red herring. Just like Russiagate was a red herring.
You're up.
Do you only want to hear voices that agree with you? Because if you do, you're not clever enough to be at this open university of the airwaves. In fact, you need to go back to remedial and learn something about what democracy and freedom of speech actually mean.
Tough questions are the most powerful weapon we have. As long as you have questions, we'll keep asking. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Well, it could have been Val Doonican that everyone crowded round their TV sets in June of 1953 to watch. I'm sure Val was in his lovely woolly jumpers, still troubadouring in those days. God rest his soul, Val Doonican. It could have been the cup final, but it wouldn't have been as great a cup final as I watched last night between Chelsea and Manchester City. Big congratulations to Chelsea on a great and well-deserved victory. But it was, in fact, the Queen's coronation. Let's take a call. Tarif in New Orleans. What have you got to say, Tarif?
Thank you for taking my call. I want to bring up something that Matthew Edwards said, which I don't know. I know people don't know who he is. He's a journalist for CanadianPatriotPress.com. He did research using Naomi Klein journalist research and other research. They had these documents that was declassified by the CIA. From the government dealing with the CIA documents. You had this man named Sir Henry Tizard was he was the chief advisor, scientific advisor for the British military, chief of British military, the military defense. He was part of that. He was specialized in radio technology and whatnot. He was part of it. He made the first UFO group in 1950, Project Blue Book that came out in 1952. And also in 1951, he went to a meeting in Montreal, Quebec, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he met with Armin Saladin in Defense Research of Development of Canada. He was part of that guy, and also representatives of the CIA to discuss brainwashing. Okay? That was in 1951. By 1953, the CIA developed MKUltra. Okay, so when you look back at in the 1930s, they had a program ran in 1930s called Attack of the Worlds. I forgot the man that broadcast it. Where you had people lost their mind, was shooting at water towers, and some people died because of it. From that, and also dealing with the military being involved with UFO research, then later on came MKUltra. They might have a tie between UFO fields of study and MKUltra. Okay, I also want to say it's 4 things going on right now. You have the U.S. government might have some type of technology that might be good, but not great. Electronic jamming of radar systems to make it appear that aircraft is going very fast. CGI, dealing with manipulation of camera footage and the last thing dealing with propaganda, making
Yeah,
it
of
seem
course,
like
all of these are possibilities. And Professor Lee Cronin, a very clever man, thinks it's all a means by which the various departments can leverage even more money out of the US taxpayer. So, for example, you could say these extraordinary maneuverability and speeds, if they are belonging to hostile or at least adversaries of the United States, we better catch up. So you better spend a few extra trillions on our technology. It could be, just like Jack Kennedy inherited, the so-called missile gap, which never existed, but which Kennedy was told existed, and then committed himself to vast increases in military expenditure in the US to close a missile gap with the Soviet Union that didn't actually exist. Tarif, thanks for the call. Let's stay on your continent, go to Sao Paulo in Brazil, where Samuel awaits. Samuel, welcome.
Hi, George. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
I'd like to start just agreeing with what you just said. I think this UFO thing now, regardless of the intention, can have only two consequences. Distract us from this crisis that we live in now. That's the biggest transfer of wealth to ever fewer hands, and to funnel more resources, especially to the military, justified by this UFO thing, which in the end gets more money to the same hands. I think instead of looking to the sky now, especially from a socialist point of view, I think it's time for us to reach out to each other, to the working class, physically reach out to each other and start determine the tone of the dialogue among people, instead of just commenting on what Biden said about Putin or what Xi Jinping think, identifying every of these leaders with their people. I think so, the American working class, the British working class, the Cuban working class, the Russian working class, the Iranian working class, the Palestinian working class, start reach out to each other and establish and create the, even eventually, you'd say, this peace treaties and commitments, because the working class is the only actor, only capable of stopping every single war. The working class is the one who builds the bombs, the one who receives it in their heads.
Okay, I think I've got you. Not everyone is a socialist, of course, and it's possible that you can have your feet in the gutter and your eyes looking up at the stars, to paraphrase the great Oscar Wilde. It's possible that you can do both. I'm in favor of space exploration, and I'm in favor of inoculating the world against malaria and wiping it out, which we can do for a mere fraction of what we spend on armaments. It's possible that we can chew gum and walk at the same time. Besides, the development of science, as the Professor Cronin just pointed out, that is applicable in space, can also make new antibiotics here on Earth and cure sickness and disease here. So thanks,
let him research it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Last word to you. Go on.
Of course, I'm infectious disease specialist. I'm not against any research. I'm just saying that this team is, from a social point of view, from an anti-war point of view, I think works more as a distraction than any other thing. And it's more justifying the more expenditure in this thing, just like this $10 billion bailout the U.S. Senate is about to give to Jeff Bezos, basically covering his $9 billion he used to buy Warner Brothers. So I think we can look everywhere. But if we don't start looking to each other, even our idea of our expectations as the human gender is getting poorer and poorer and mediocre by the day.
Okay, I've got to cut you short, Samuel. There's a lot of people want to talk, but thanks for the call. Let's stay there and go to Florida, where Elliot is on the line. Elliot, welcome.
Oh, George.
Yeah, hi. Go ahead, Elliot.
Thank you, George. So good to talk to you again. The last caller just took away my thunder. I totally agree with what he said in most part. But my main point was, my main knee-jerk reaction when the report in the United States, from the government and from securities surfaced, was that it was a psyops operation. Because we're so used to, in this country on the left, we're so used to psyops operations and the media kindly distracting you with one thing or another, and it seemed perfectly made for that. But on another level, it just seems the pictures that are being projected as these objects are always the same. This is for 50 years. There are always these grainy, hard to see objects, and I'm just very skeptical of the idea.
No, you're right. I mean, the flying saucer hasn't developed much over the course of my lifetime. It looks exactly the same as it did when I was a kid. I'm more interested in the speed and maneuverability from a standing start rather than the pictures. I'm interested more in the radar, in the testimony of the pilots about what they saw in terms of the superhuman speed, supersonic, hypersonic speed from a standing start of, for example, these triangular-shaped objects that Nick Pope was talking about earlier. I'm not remotely persuaded that a giant centipede is seeking to show love or aggression towards you. I never got a chance to ask him. You could probably get along with loving a giant jellyfish, but a big centipede coming after you might be quite frightening.
Well, I'm a bit ambivalent on the issue on some level, because I have seen and been with friends, and we have seen large triangular light objects flying overhead at a very low speed, or I have close friends in my life that have told me back in the late 60s and early 70s, they actually saw the saucer land in front of them or pass by in New York or go overhead. I've never, I don't know how to react to that. I'm still a skeptic that there is any life on another planet that can come and visit, but yet these things are there. And I understand
it would be quite unlikely that of all the billions, hundreds of billions of planets that exist, that there was only ever life on one of them, wouldn't it?
Well, I believe it, though. I believe we are it. Even though I do believe, in a mystical sense, the entire universe is conscious and alive, and that consciousness goes throughout all of us and through everything in a mystical way. I don't believe that there are actually other planets, too many, and I say that because after so many decades of looking for this life, there really hasn't been any found.
But that's a mere second in historical time. But thanks, Elliot. Pat is in South Carolina. He's seen a UFO. We better talk to him. Pat, South Carolina, welcome. Go ahead.
Hi, George. It's Pat, and I am a girl. I'm female.
Very nice to hear from you. Go ahead.
Yes, I saw a UFO in the 1970s, middle 1970s, and I was living in Meridian, Mississippi at the time. I got a phone call. I was in the house. Somebody said, go up, told me to go look in the sky. So I went outside, and it was just before dark. I went out there, and there was this massive, and when I say massive, the person who called me was miles away from me. And it appeared as big to them as it did to me. And I'm looking at it, and it looked like it was just spinning right above, above the trees, but I couldn't tell how high above the trees. It was so big. It seemed like it was above the trees.
What shape was it, Pat?
Well, the thing about it, it was iridescent, as if it were spinning so fast but there was a light. There was a light created. It was like an iridescent light, and you couldn't see a solid form. It was just an iridescent light.
I see.
But George, we're looking at it. Cars are stopped. People are getting out of their cars. There are people who saw this other than me. Okay, we're all standing there. My children were with me. We're looking up at this. And then all of a sudden, see, the Naval Air Station is in Meridian Naval Air Station. And these two jets go flying by towards each other, heading towards each other. And this was in, I guess what you'd say, maybe heading towards this thing that we were looking at. And we're still looking at, because we're mesmerized, and it right in front of my eyes. I'm telling you, George, this is not an exaggeration. As fast as you can blink, or through 2 to 3 seconds, or maybe that was too long, it went in front of my eyes up and turned into what looked like a star way up in the sky. It looked exactly like a star, kind of glittering a little, but not as. So it disappeared. It was different than a star. It had a dullness.
It disappeared from your view upwards and extraordinarily quickly.
Yeah, I'm so fast. I mean, it was like as fast as you can blink almost. As those jets were heading right to it, and it was gone. It was gone. It was not in the paper the next day. It was not in the news, on the news report at night. It was not on the radio, and my husband at the time was working at the radio station. Nothing. There was nothing, not a word. And not too long before that, and I only remember this because of the coincidence, there were two men who lived in Pascagoula, or they were fishing. I don't know if they lived there. I just know they were fishing and claimed they had been taken aboard a spaceship, right, and had been analyzed or studied or whatever. I don't remember the details because I wasn't paying a lot of attention at the time, but everybody thought this is cuckoo. But the story was continuing, and then it just suddenly dropped. And I've often wondered what happened with that story. But it wasn't that long before what we saw that day. And I'm telling you, there were people there in the street with me, cars stopped, looking. There are people who know they saw what I saw, and miles away, so I don't know how many other people might have seen it, I got a phone call from someone miles away, go look up in the sky. And I talked with them afterwards, and it appeared as large to them where they were. I'm talking about miles away. When I say miles, I mean 15, 20. It appeared as large to them as it did to us.
Well, that is fascinating.
So,
Pat, thank you very much for that eyewitness testimony. Now, I've got to take a break, unfortunately. Operation Dynamo took place on the 4th of June in 1940. Was it A, the splitting of the atom, B, the Dunkirk evacuation, C, the cracking of the Enigma code? I'll give you the answer, along with more calls after the break.
Radio Sputnik.
And it's thank you for, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, haggis. Look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
Sputnik has been launched to give you a closer look at everything happening in the world.
Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
The mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
The 4th of June, 1940, was the Dunkirk evacuation. A defeat which Mr. Churchill turned into a victory. Now on Boris and Carrie. Marco Polo says, I wish them the best. In a year, Boris has been critically ill, dealt with a pandemic, partner has a baby now, married. That's some roller coaster. He deserves a break, in my viewpoint. And Matt says, completely agree. Politicians are people usually trying to do their best, whatever their politics. Two people getting married should always be a time for congratulations. And Borg says Dominic Cummings is only upset because he wasn't invited to Boris's wedding. And on the UFOs, we're being snowed under by then. We're under alien attack. Multi Clapton says, how many starving people could you save with the budget of space travel? Except that would not be what they would do with the money being spent on space travel. Because I don't run the world, Multi Clapton, and neither do you. Alan Harris says, Obama won't call them aliens, just undocumented life forms. And Malice says, how can anyone be an expert on things that are unexplained? If your expert can explain the unexplained, then it's no longer unexplained. And Andrew Wales says, am I missing something, or hasn't George backed lockdowns? What are you talking about? And Tony in Liverpool says, anyone who went to the Grafton in Liverpool would see extraterrestrials every Friday and Saturday night. And Anthony says, I'm so disillusioned, I'm hoping that quite soon man can land on the sun. Tim Wilson says, quite tautological to poll if there's no intelligence anywhere, whilst posing the question. Very parliamentary. Well, I'm not responsible for that tautology or any of the polls, any of their wording or any of their subjects. But it is an interesting philosophical question that you pose. Perhaps someone will call in to contribute. Ross says they're treating us like idiots. There are no alien intelligences visiting Earth. The US elite is up to something, as always. And Martin Taylor says, UFOs are thought to originate from a lab in Wuhan. And on Labour, Dr. Max Davison says, we have a better society now for the disabled. And Max says, Keir Starmer should sell sandals. He's an expert in flip-flopping. And Stuart Wheeler says, Dominic Cummings handed the Labour Party the smoking gun they needed to bring down Boris Johnson. John Ashworth and Keith Starmer threw that smoking gun straight into a bucket of water, lest it damage him. They are barely even going through the motions of being an opposition. That's the tweet of the night so far. Stuart, let's go to Gerasimos in Ottawa, in Canada. Gerasimos, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. How good to talk to you.
Thank you. Nice to hear from you.
I have a little story I want to share with you.
Go on.
Well, it happened quite a while ago in 1957, 58. I was just a 12-year-old with my brother, and he called me to look out of the window, and we looked up in the sky, and there was a cigar-shaped object moving very rapidly from north to south. We got my telescope. I had just received a telescope for my 12th birthday, and we watched this thing, and we watched it for 6.5 minutes. Again, there was some fluff in the newspapers the next day, but nothing more was said. That was the last time I saw anything until 19...
Brother, it couldn't have been moving very rapidly if you were able to watch it for 6.5 minutes.
Well, it was going from horizon to horizon, up and down, left and right, over and up,
so it was
in every direction.
Crisscrossing. I've got you.
Yeah, it was crisscrossing in front of us.
Now,
and the next
when you
time,
say cigar-shaped, I'm familiar with cigars. I used to smoke them. Was it one of my Monte Cristo number 2s, was it fatter at one end than the other, or was it the same shape the whole length of it?
It was a nice Monte Cristo number 2 tapered cigar on one side. Then in the center of it, there was a red part of the whole ship, and we heard no noise.
So it was silent. It was silent. Now you and your brother saw it. Does your brother remember it exactly as you do?
Identically.
And do you think anyone else saw it?
Well, we know that other people saw it because it was in the newspaper the next day.
Okay.
But it was tossed off as being a weather balloon. But weather balloons don't go crisscross across the sky in that kind of pattern.
No, although there have been weather balloons mistakenly identified as UFOs, but you're convinced this one wasn't.
No, I'm pretty sure. And then in 1974, I was walking outside of St. Catherine's Monastery with the Archbishops of Sinai, then Archbishop Damianos, and we looked up into the sky, and we saw a silver light which moved rapidly from one place to another, much faster than any airplane. So that was, both of us saw that.
The Archbishop saw it too?
He did. And he's the one who pointed it out to me.
Did he think
and it moved very rapidly.
He think a godly sign?
He thought it was a very unusual thing to see. His exact words.
Very interesting.
Most unusual sight.
Very interesting. Thanks for the call. Different subject now. Boris Johnson, Terence in Norwich. Go ahead, Terence.
Hello, Mr. Galloway. Nice to speak to you.
And you, sir.
Earlier on, I found it remarkable. I enjoyed Mr. Stanton talking about body language, etc. But for me, you go back to the First World War, the generals sent the upper classes sent their kids to war, a glorious, glorious way to go, until they realized that their kids, they wanted to keep them. Second World War, they didn't send so many, or they made them captains. They watched the proletariat die. Cummins, Johnson, et al., they don't care a fig about deaths in Britain. They vastly underestimate everything. They wouldn't listen to science, but I'm not surprised by Cummins or Johnson. They're like rats in a sack. Pretty pathetic.
Why do you think they've fallen out then, Terence?
Well, I think it's a question of incompetence, wanting to be the more incompetent. I mean, you cannot, in one instance, drive and pretend you flagrantly disregarding lockdown when he's going to have his eyes tested, wear a beanie hat and try to look 29 to appeal to a demographic when he's gone on for 60 years of age. Cummings, a serial philanderer, they fell out simply because of power. And this is the upper classes, as you know yourself, George.
Just to be clear, Dominic Cummings is not a serial philanderer. You were referring to Boris Johnson.
That's right. Well, of course, and he is a serial philanderer.
He can't sue us. He definitely can't sue us for that.
No. Well, he could try to sue me. I wouldn't care less. I mean, having had issues with the Child Support Agency, I've mentioned him in many letters because I'm not ashamed to say I'm the father of my daughters. Leaving that aside, I'll come back to my point, Mr. Galloway.
Go on.
My point is this, Mr. Galloway, that the both of them are in the same sack. That's the leftovers of any leading strata of society, and that's all we've got. Hancock's half hour, you've got pretty pathetics that have been sacked. They're in the same sack. They just want power. They're incompetent, and they don't care about your grandmothers who've died, your uncles who've died, and they still don't care, Mr. Galloway, as far as I'm concerned.
As far as I'm concerned, too, I think they should all be on trial for corporate manslaughter.
Yes, and that's why when you were a member of the parliament, you were very, very much disliked. But your people that voted for you like you to vote you in all the time. Because you sometimes were not afraid of telling the truth, which is what I'm all about. St. Augustine, it will always be the truth. And these people that are running Britain have lied systematically. Richie T-Snack, eat out to kill out. It's dreadful.
You're good. You need to write some lines for me, Terence. Thank you very much indeed for that excellent call. Have I got time for Cornelius in Swansea? Yes. Cornelius, go ahead.
How are you?
Yes.
Regarding Cummins, I honestly think that Well, the people, first of all, that are calling out Cummins at the moment and blaming the government that they never locked down sooner are the same people that were saying that President Trump was a racist because he locked down his country and stopped flights coming in from China, stopped flights coming in from Europe. 2 days later, he stopped flights coming from the UK.
Why didn't we lock down our airports? We're an island. We could have much more easily than many other countries stopped people coming in here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, I agree with that totally, that there has been mistakes made by the government. But, I mean, it's easy in hindsight, and it's easy sitting on the fence, and it's easy to criticise.
It's not hindsight in my case. I was saying it here as the crisis unfolded from the first day. And Dr. Ranjit, the Moats medic, was saying it every single week. So there's no hindsight involved, and nobody pays us, Cornelius. But the people we do pay made an absolute cod of it.
Well, yes, yes and no. I mean, the situation in care homes, obviously that was a disaster. The Nightingale hospitals that they opened up, they never used. I mean, people that were put back in care homes from hospitals should have been put in those Nightingale hospitals, make sure they're okay.
That's a pretty big, I think I'm reading you that you are, in general, a defender of the government's stance.
No. I'm not saying I'm a defender of the government. I have got no allegiance to any party whatsoever. But I just think of a pandemic.
Yeah, but what you just said there, and I agree with it, that is the corporate manslaughter of thousands of our old people. It doesn't get much worse than that.
Yeah, true, but do you hear anybody calling up to you, George, and condemning China for not shutting their borders? They knew they had a highly contagious... hang on a minute. They knew they had a highly contagious virus on the loose, and they did not shut their borders.
Well, the real fools are those that allowed Chinese flights to land in their country. Not China.
Oh, so you think they're the fools, not China?
No, of course. If people wanted out of China and China had stopped them from leaving, we would have been in the middle of a scandal of a big Chinese kidnap. The fools are those that allowed every day flights to come from China, from New York, from New Delhi. New Delhi with the Indian variant was still flying people into Britain several times a day last week. It's us that's the fools.
Hang on a minute, George. Hang on a minute. Everybody on the media are jumping on a bandwagon regarding this Indian variant, okay? Yeah. The Indian variant is maybe more contagious, but is no serious than any of the coronavirus we've had this year. Okay? The majority of the people in the United Kingdom have been vaccinated. The vulnerable has been vaccinated. If people that are vulnerable, ethnic communities, whoever, that are not prepared to take the vaccine, well, if they get seriously ill, I don't particularly give a toss.
Actually, most of the people who are refusing to take the vaccine have nothing to do with the ethnic community. Your mask slipped there. If you look at the mass demonstrations all over this country, against vaccination, COVID is a hoax and so on, they're overwhelmingly white British people.
Yes, George, I know that, but you listen to the Labour Party and you listen to Lavie or whatever his name is. He keeps bringing up the thing about diversity. They keep bringing up about regarding ethnic communities.
Don't class me with David Lammy. Cornelius, thanks. The time is such that I can't continue our interesting conversation because in a few seconds I have to go to the news with Jamie Lowe. But I wanted to tell you that after the break, after the news, we've got the sage that is Caleb Maupin talking about United States politics and media, and our very own and utterly irrepressible Patrick Christys. Let me give you a question to go out with. Whose album featuring creatures from outer space was released in this week in 1972? A. Led Zeppelin, B, David Bowie, C, Adam and the Ants. Let's go to the news with Jamie Lowe.
The mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com.
Radio Sputnik News.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has married his fiancée Carrie Symonds in a secretly planned wedding at Westminster Cathedral. He's the first Prime Minister to get married while in office in nearly 200 years. The marriage took place in a small ceremony on Saturday afternoon, a Downing Street spokesman said. The spokesman added that the couple would celebrate again with family and friends next summer, with their honeymoon also delayed until then. 30 guests were invited to the ceremony at short notice, the maximum number of attendees allowed under COVID restrictions in England. A small number of church officials were involved in preparations for the Catholic ceremony. Although Johnson has been married twice before, the Roman Catholic Church can allow divorcees to remarry if previous marriages were outside of the Roman Catholic Church. The head of NHS providers in England has said very few COVID patients in hospital have received 2 coronavirus jabs, showing the vaccines provide very high levels of protection. Chris Hobson said patients now tended to be younger, meaning there was a lower need for critical care. But he said it was incredibly striking how busy hospitals were as they deal with backlogs of non-COVID cases. Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi has confirmed that the government is considering making coronavirus vaccines compulsory for NHS staff. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to hold on to power by attempting to dissuade his opponents from forming a government. Centrist party leader Yair Lapid has until Wednesday to build a coalition. Media reports from Israel say he is close to reaching a deal with the ultra-nationalist leader Naftali Bennett. Netanyahu, Israel's longest-serving prime minister, fell short of a decisive majority at a general election in March, the 4th in 2 years. Lapid could be close to reaching a deal, according to analysts. Netanyahu, who is on trial for fraud, has been in power for 12 years and has dominated Israeli politics for a generation. He was given the first chance at forming a government, but was unable to secure the coalition partners needed. Lapid's Yesh Atid party came second to Netanyahu's right-wing Likud in the last election and was given until June 2nd to build a coalition. President Emmanuel Macron has warned that France would withdraw troops from Mali if political instability there leads to greater Islamist radicalisation. It follows a second coup in 9 months in the West African nation. Macron warned of the risk of Mali moving towards greater Islamist influence. France has over 5,000 troops in the Sahel region, which has been a front line in the war against Islamist militancy. French troops have been supporting forces in Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Burkina and Faso and Chad to battle militants in the Sahel region since 2013. Macron told Le Journal du Dimanche newspaper that he had told regional leaders that France would not support countries where there was no democratic legitimacy or transition, and that France had no intention of keeping troops in Africa forever. A new national flagship is to be commissioned by the British government in a bid to boost trade and industry globally, the Prime Minister has said. The vessel will be the successor to the Royal Yacht Britannia, which was retired in 1997. The government plans to build the ship in the UK at a reported cost of £200 million. Labour said the government must demonstrate clearly how the ship is expected to boost trade, jobs and growth. The name for the new flagship is yet to be announced, but there is suggestions that it will be named after the Duke of Edinburgh, who helped design Britannia. The vessel would be used to promote British interests around the world, including hosting trade fairs and diplomatic meetings, as the UK seeks to build links and boost exports following Brexit. Downing Street said costs for the construction and operation of the ship would be confirmed after the tendering process concluded. Construction is set to start as early as next year, with the ship expected to enter the service within the next 4 years. At least 2 people have died and more than 20 were wounded in a shooting outside a concert hall in Florida. The shooting took place between midnight and 1 a.m. local time in Haley City, north of Miami. 3 people climbed out of a white car with assault rifles and handguns and started firing indiscriminately into the crowd, Police Director Alfredo Ramirez told reporters. At least one of the wounded is in a critical condition, police said. It comes just days after an employee at a train yard killed 9 people on the other side of the country in California. Swiss motorcycle racer Jason de Pasquier has died in hospital from injuries sustained in a crash at the Italian Grand Prix. The 19-year-old fell at the Mugello circuit during qualifying in the Moto3 class on Saturday. He was involved in a serious multi-rider incident and was airlifted to a hospital in Florence. Officials announced today that he had died. And finally, a man in Washington, the USA, has dreamed his whole life of finding a raw diamond to create a one-of-a-kind engagement ring for his future partner, but he didn't know that it would actually become a reality. Christian Leiden said that the idea of mining his own gems for an engagement ring was planted in his head since school, but he had no idea how to accomplish it. Later, when Leiden's co-worker told him about Crater of Diamonds State Park in Arkansas 3 years ago, he believed his dream could be a reality. He'd been dating his girlfriend Desiree for 2 years. He watched videos from those who were successful in finding diamonds at the park and tried to get as much information as he could before deciding to plan his trip. His friend Josh decided to join him. On the 3rd day in the park, after 2 unsuccessful ones, they decided to try a different approach and just mine the surface of the gravel. It was towards the end of the day, Leiden said. It was the last 2 carts and we started throwing materials in the screens, he said. When he shook the screen, there on top was a yellow diamond weighing over 2 carats. The day after Leiden arrived back, he and his girlfriend went mushroom hunting during their walk in the woods and pulled out the diamond ring and proposed. She said yes. And that's the latest here on Sputnik News. I'm Jamie Lowe.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Now, whose album featuring creatures from outer space was released this week in 1972? A. Led Zeppelin, B. David Bowie, or C. Adam and the Ants? These 3 names take me back. Well, of course, it was David Bowie. Now, the poll will close in about 25 minutes. So 1:30 is the end of this poll. Plenty of people voting. And I'm glad to say, actually, the great majority of you say that the marriage of Mr. and Mrs. Boris Johnson is a cause for congratulations. 61% up 2. B, she got lucky. 7% down 1. Who are the 7% that think Carrie Simons is the lucky one in that marriage? And C, whitewash, i.e. cover-up, to distract, 32%. Of course, the bans must have been posted some weeks ago. He could not necessarily have planned it for this weekend, knowing what was going to happen in the last week. But hey, people like to believe these things. So 32% of you think it's a whitewash, down 1. So you've got still 20 minutes that you can cast your vote. Now, my colleague on RT America, Caleb Maupin, is one of the smartest political operators on the continent. And I wanted to talk to him tonight about US media and US politics, and I'm glad to say he agreed. Caleb, thank you for joining us as always. Let's start with your president. Where is he at the moment? Does he know he's there? And what is he up to?
Indeed. People are looking at Joe Biden, and especially as he seems to get a little tired in the summer heat and wondering exactly what's going on. He's got an infrastructure plan that is subject to constant negotiation. There does not seem to be even a clear consensus within his own party about what it will and will not include. A lot of chaos. We've got the Vice President Kamala Harris making some woke jokes before U.S. Navy graduates that aren't exactly going over, and many criticizing her tweets around Memorial Day. This is a situation where the country is still in ruins following the pandemic. We've got infrastructure falling apart. That was a problem long before the pandemic came along. Joe Biden gave us an optimistic joint address to Congress, but we're waiting to see some action.
Now, what's in his plan?
Well, at this point, he wants to spend $6 trillion on all kinds of things. That would include fixing up the roads of the country, securing the bridges of the country, power plants, water treatment facilities. And the country is really in need of this. I don't know if
I was going to say, that sounds all good news to me.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, look, for the past several decades, the country has just been decaying. We have municipalities across the United States that are in shambles. They are literally unpaving the roads. They actually have this machine they call a reclaimer that pulls up the asphalt, pulverizes it, and replaces a paved road with dirt road. I kid you not. And in a number of states throughout the United States, you have municipalities that are so bankrupt they cannot afford to maintain paved roads, and we are unpaving our roads. You know, while in developing countries like China and Nicaragua, they are paving new roads. We in the United States, supposedly the richest country in the world, are unpaving our roads. I mean, we saw the disaster a few years back with the drinking water in Flint, Michigan. We've seen power plants that just collapsed. That happened in Texas. You know, the power grid just popped this summer and left people throughout the state without electricity in the freezing cold. You know, we have a big infrastructure problem. While our government has been so interested in investing in bombs and tanks and drones and weapons of mass destruction and military spending and military bases around the world, America has been left behind. And both previous presidents, Obama and Trump, both promised they were going to do something about it and didn't. So now we will see if Biden will actually do something about it. But this $6 trillion plan has got his own party divided. It's got the Republicans up in arms. They are talking about all kinds of compromises that will happen. I'm waiting to see what actually happens with this plan.
Now, you mentioned Kamala Harris and her woke jokes. That sounds entirely in character to me. Tell us about them and how it's gone down.
Well, we have a situation where it seems pretty apparent that the U.S. military, in particular the upper ranks, the U.S. military brass, and the White House are not on the same page about this kind of woke makeover for the United States. You know, a lot of the military brass are conservative folks, Christian, evangelical. Christianity is very big among them. They are traditional. They certainly don't want their kids going to school and reading Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. But yet it seems like, in particular, the intelligence apparatus has argued that the United States needs a woke makeover. We need to show the world that we are the most anti-racist, the most pro-LGBT country in the world, that we go around liberating people from regimes that are too uptight and conservative. So while the intelligence apparatus and the media has decided we're going to have a woke makeover to make imperialism look hip, at the same time, we have a military brass that doesn't see things that way and has a very different narrative of world events. So Kamala Harris goes to, you know, speak to the Navy graduates, and her jokes just fall flat. And then, you know, this is Memorial Day weekend. Tomorrow is Memorial Day, the day we commemorate those who died in wars. And, you know, we have Kamala Harris tweeting out, instead of honoring Memorial Day, we have her tweeting out, enjoy the long weekend. You know, and people are seeing that as a subtle dig at the military. Look, there's long been a division within the U.S. structure and government apparatus between the military industrial complex, which is a huge part of the U.S. economy, and, the folks that come out of Harvard and Yale and the intelligence apparatus, the Council on Foreign Relations, that strategically plan out how to market the United States around the world and covertly push soft power. And those two wings of the American apparatus, the American government, the American deep state, if you want to use those terms, they have long been at odds. There's been a lot written about that, about, the Anglo-American establishment, et cetera. And we're seeing these differences play out. And the fact that Kamala Harris didn't go over so well with the Navy graduates is just yet another incident in this long-standing disagreement beneath the surface.
Now, when the history of this recent period comes to be written, one of the most bizarre of many bizarre episodes will be the extent to which so many people in America came to believe that Donald Trump was somehow an agent of Russia. This despite the fact that Donald Trump caused more trouble for Russia than virtually any other president, imposed more sanctions, threatened Germany with the condign punishment for having the temerity in its own interest to have a pipeline for its gas supply from Russia and so on, the Nord Stream 2 project. In fact, Trump was wildly anti-Russian in his actions, and he was mercilessly flayed by the democratic establishment as such in politics and in the media, perhaps even especially in the media. How they're handling the fact that Joe Biden has now ended the threat of sanctions on the Nord Stream and will shortly meet the aforementioned Vladimir Putin.
Well, this points to kind of a long-standing irony in American politics. Look, Richard Nixon, he went and met with Mao in China. And why did Nixon, the conservative, the right-winger who took power on a platform of, going after the black liberation struggle and opposing the peace movement, why is it that he's the one that met with Mao? It's because no Democrat would ever get away with such a thing. A Democrat would have been called a communist and a traitor for meeting with Mao. So Nixon, a conservative Republican whose right-wing and anti-communist credentials were very high, he was able to do it. And you can see that parallel. Donald Trump took office being accused of being, quote-unquote, Putin's puppet, Russiagate hysteria. So on that basis, we saw Trump constantly trying to prove how anti-Russian he was, ripping up nuclear treaties. I mean, very dangerous. You can talk about the short-range treaty and the various agreements, nuclear agreements that he ripped up. You can talk about the attack on Germany and Nord Stream 2. The Trump administration was constantly on the defensive when it came to anything related to Russia. Meanwhile, Biden took office accusing Donald Trump of being soft on Russia, saying all kinds of nasty things about Russia. And now Biden is in office, and we're seeing suddenly the nuclear treaties are not being allowed to expire. We're seeing the possibility of there's going to be a summit soon between the two leaders, between Putin and Biden. And it seems like because Biden is not on the defensive, that gives him a little bit more of a free hand to possibly negotiate and improve relations. And this is the longstanding irony of American politics. People do the opposite of what they are accused of doing.
I genuinely don't want to be too disrespectful to your president, but many people in your country and elsewhere, I think, will be skeptical as to what extent President Biden is capable of having a proper summit with Vladimir Putin. I mean, it's the greatest mismatch since Rocky Marciano fought Jack Bodell, isn't it?
Indeed. Biden is tripping over his words and seems a little bit tired, and everyone knows that Russian President Vladimir Putin is a smooth actor. I mean, he doesn't miss a word. Everything is very careful and sharp and to the point. So it'll be certainly a contrast in styles and approaches when the two of them are standing next to each other.
Well, so was Rocky Marciano versus Jack Bodell, and it ended with Jack horizontal. Caleb Maupin, thank you as always for a wonderful tour of the horizon in the United States politics. Thank you for joining me. Now, Patrick Christys, our British media and political commentator, will be up after the break. How's the poll going? Carrie Simon's marriage to Boris Johnson, 62%, congratulations, up one. She got lucky, still at 7%. I'd love to know who the 7% are that see it that way, and 31%, down one, say it was whitewash. Let me take just a 60-second break. Count them.
Radio Sputnik.
We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
The mother of all talk shows. Join our faculty of legends, contributors, and callers. Everyone is welcome.
Two truths, says Tim. One, the World War II generation that we commemorated, Colonel Tom et al., last year, were killed off in the care homes. Just think about that. And two, the poor people on the minimum wage kept the country going during the lockdowns. Very good point, Tim. And Angela Powell says, did you hear Alistair Campbell on Sky News this morning? He had the nerve to accuse Boris Johnson of being responsible for tens of thousands of COVID deaths. He may or may not be right with that, but he's obviously forgotten about the role he played leading up to and during the Iraq War. What a hypocrite. That's actually, sorry, I beg your pardon, from Gary in South Wales. Well, I'll tell you what, Gary, once he sees my film on the strange death of Dr. David Kelly on the 17th of July, he won't be quite so insouciant about that. And Anthony says, Professor Cronin, you don't have to travel to Venus to find weird life. And Resolute says, we, Kieran, let's get married. Yes, my darling, that will distract them. Resolute says, you needed another option on your poll for simply don't care. And Dave says, I don't get that take. He's skint with CCJs to his name. I better explain that to the international audience. Dave is saying that Boris Johnson is broke. He doesn't have any money and he's got court orders against him for debts. Though that's actually a bit of a stretch. It wasn't really his debt and it was a political thing. Now, this is Dave's point and it's been made by many people today on social media, including here on the show. I don't care about Boris Johnson's marriage, except I don't think the church should have let him marry in church and or a cathedral due to his poor marriage, parenting and fidelity history. And Raj Unsworth on the same subject says Boris Johnson's wedding was a kick in the teeth for the many divorced Catholics, some of them women, who escaped abusive relationships, who were not permitted to have a church wedding. An explanation is owed from the Catholic hierarchy. Now, that's a series of fair points. And before I answer it, I'm going to ask if Norma in Bristol wants to talk about Boris's wedding. Because if she does, I'd like to deal with them all three in one go. Norma?
Hello, George.
Nice to hear from you again. Go ahead.
Well, it's about the Catholic Church, really.
Yeah.
It's now so open-minded, that it's got the third marriage ceremony of our Prime Minister. I know his previous marriages were outside of the Catholic Church, but surely it would have been better to have had a registry office ceremony, do you think, with a blessing from the Catholic Church, like Prince Charles did. In the Anglican Church, he's a defender of the faith,
well,
isn't
we've
he?
now got, for the very first time in our history, a Catholic Prime Minister. And it's already causing a great deal of fluttering in the dovecots. This, by the way, 61 years after the United States had its first Catholic president. Now, the similarity between Jack Kennedy and Boris Johnson probably ends there, at least from my political standpoint. But it's got to be good news that finally a Catholic has become Prime Minister of Britain. It's got to be good news that unlike Tony Blair, they didn't have to hide it, because Blair, of course, waited till he'd left office to formally convert to Catholicism. And we are now seeing today a large number of proscriptions of things that Boris Johnson will not now be able to do because he's outed himself as a Catholic. That shows that our country is still in the dark ages on these things, Norma.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. And I think that's a good thing. It's more open-minded. But, George, if the Catholic Church could now agree to marry gay and lesbian people, it would give them respect and happiness
It'll
for
never do that.
their union.
It will never do that, but you're right to identify that it is unusual, to say the least, that a man with the marital and sexual and parental record of Boris Johnson was allowed to get married, not just in church, but in the cathedral. And I don't think you can separate that from the point I've just made. It is a matter of historic importance. I mean, through the glass right now is my grandson, Sean. He was the first Roman Catholic baptized in a Roman Catholic ceremony inside the Houses of Parliament since Oliver Cromwell. That's how long it had been before a Catholic child was allowed to be baptized in the House of Commons. Now he's a strapping young man and a student of great promise. So that's why the church did it, is the point I'm making to you.
Yeah,
the church did it because of the historic importance of it.
Yeah, I can see your point, and I'm totally with that point, because I don't think our royal family can marry.
No, they can't. In fact, those that have had to change their religion to marry into the royal family.
But it's just that, I don't know, when you say there's all sorts of things in the Bible, and, fornication's a sin, isn't it? But they don't like the sin of lesbians and gay people in the Catholic Church.
No, but there's plenty of other churches. There's plenty of other churches that welcome.
I don't know. The Anglican is very good.
The Church of England has as many gay vicars as it has straight ones, I think.
But they don't perform the ceremony, do they?
Oh, you know more than me. I thought they were fully...
No, they might give it a blessing. They might give it a blessing, but they don't perform it.
I thought they were fully woke. Forgive my ignorance on that. Well, a church that was founded on the genitals of Henry VIII, you'd think would be quite open-minded on these matters. But anyway, here's my point to you and to David and to Raj.
Okay.
And you made it yourself earlier. These previous marriages of Boris Johnson never existed, according to the Catholic Church, because they were not Catholic marriages. So from the point of view of the Church, these divorces, rather, never existed. So there was no bar on that. Dave makes the point, and he's got a good point, that someone who's actually wrecked other people's marriages, as well as wrecked his own, he should think himself jolly lucky that he got to marry in Westminster Cathedral. I think we can all agree on that, Norma.
Oh, yes, I know, George. It's, I've been and forgot my thread now. I was listening to you.
That's what happens to me.
My thread.
Women always claim that they forget their thread because they've been listening to me. Thank you very much indeed, Norma.
Thank you.
Very, very nice to talk to you. I think that in a minute or two, I'll be able to get Patrick Christys. So Maui Bill says aliens are very wisely keeping their distance from us, and I can't blame them. That's a good cue to go to Patrick Christys. Patrick, welcome back to the show. I'm sorry we're socially distant tonight. I know that you have many important things that you have to do this week, so I'm glad you could fit me in at all. The aliens are keeping their distance from us because life on Earth is just too weird. And it was a pretty weird week, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a pretty weird week, although having seen Dominic Cummings' testimony, I did wonder whether or not aliens were indeed amongst us, actually, George, for a period of time there. Dominic Cummings, of course, went nuclear, didn't he, really? And I thought that was quite extraordinary, making a series of quite serious allegations. The big question mark is going to be whether or not, of course, any of it's really true and how much we believe a man who sat in the Rose Garden and lied to us so easily and comfortably in relation to Barnard Castle and testing his eyesight. I spoke to Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen yesterday, who told me he described Dominic Cummings as the kind of man who would go on your stag do and then run breathlessly to your fiancée and tell her all the gory details. So I thought that kind of sums up what Dominic Cummings' view is like in the House of Parliament now and amongst Conservative MPs. But as I'm sure we'll get stuck into, several pretty fruity allegations that Matt Hancock should have been sacked 15 to 20 times, especially over
I think a lot of people might agree with that one.
Yeah, I think that's an element of this that I can believe, that Matt Hancock is not quite up to the task. That said, being health minister in a time of a pandemic is no easy task anywhere. But the notion is, according to Dominic Cummings, that Matt Hancock actually was fundamentally dishonest. And Matt Hancock denies this. Was that Matt Hancock was fundamentally dishonest when it came to people being sent back into care homes and what he knew vis-a-vis them essentially not being given coronavirus tests, or having had a coronavirus test and testing positive, still being sent back into care homes. Of course, coronavirus ripped through care homes at the start of this pandemic, and was that on our health secretary? That's the question. The other element to Dominic Cummings' diatribe, I suppose, is that Boris is not up to the task and that he didn't take coronavirus seriously even after he had the virus. Now, that I can believe to an extent, but I think what really kind of was the takeaway from me was that Boris Johnson clearly was so reluctant to want to enforce all of these lockdowns, or at least that's the message that's coming out. And it's no surprise, George, that Boris Johnson, in the immediate aftermath of Dominic Cummings' statement there, went up 6 points in the polls.
Yes, very interesting. I think we can say it might come back to haunt him, but I think we can say he's home free from the Dominic Cummings offensive. Which is quite peculiar in a way, given, and perhaps that's the explanation, given how one note the media have been about Cummings' performance. Almost one note, certainly amongst the liberal chatterati, the BBC and so on. It was as if Cummings had come down from the Mount with the truth chiseled into stone. And yet Johnson's gone up, not down, in the opinion polls.
Yeah, this is it. And I think the idea now, you can remember back to a time, essentially, I suppose, this time last year, really, where we were being told that Dominic Cummings was in charge. Boris was in his pocket. Boris was just a puppet, a poodle, as it were, and that actually Dominic Cummings was running the country. Well, now we're being told, why didn't Boris Johnson just do what Dominic Cummings told him to do? And you can't have that both ways. Only one of those things can be right, and the media needs to make its mind up there as to which one of those it believes to be true. Boris Johnson's base, I suppose, and indeed a lot of people now, I think, fair enough for me to say this really around the country, are sick and tired of lockdowns. And the notion that Boris Johnson was potentially one of the only people who was quite reluctant to thrust us into a never-ending cycle of lockdowns actually did him quite a lot of good with his base. I thought Dominic Cummings let himself down slightly and showed potentially his true colours in the way that he spoke about Carrie, Boris Johnson's now wife, of course. Where did that come from? But he refused to call her by name, and he refused to call her Boris Johnson's fiancée. Instead, he kept referring her to rather disdainfully as Boris's girlfriend, which I thought was a bit of a slight there and kind of showed his true colours in that respect, and did tell that quite funny story, to be honest.
Yes, it was a tad mean to do that. Yeah. Especially as they have a child together and they live in Downing Street together, which is pretty groundbreaking, even in my lifetime. The idea that someone could live in Downing Street with their then girlfriend is quite extraordinary. Now, you correctly identified that Dominic Cummings, if aliens are amongst us, they might look like him. He is a very Martian-looking fellow. With a Martian brain, they say. Is he finished now, or does he have more in his locker?
Well, he's finished potentially in more ways than one. I don't think he's finished talking. I'm not sure he will ever be finished talking. I'm not sure he'll ever be finished tweeting. However, I think you'd have to be for Another Planet to follow some of his Twitter threads. I would urge everyone now, or so at some point after your show, George, to go and just try to follow what Dominic Cummings is going on about on his own Twitter page. It's incredibly difficult to do. I think he might be finished in a sense, professionally. It's a brave man that employs Dominic Cummings now. A man who thinks for no second whatsoever about going absolutely nuclear and revealing essentially all the state secrets, for goodness sake. What would he do if he was just head of a think tank? You know, you don't want to be in those HR meetings with Cummings, do you? So I can imagine that being very difficult for him. Look, it's whether or not I suppose he wants to end up doing the rounds and go on things like I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. I suspect he'll write a book. And I do suspect as well that there'll be potential for him going forward. He kept his options open. He had his eye on the next man, Rishi Sunak, and on Michael Gove, because he's previously worked for Michael Gove. And he was actually quite complimentary about those people. And so I do wonder whether or not he wonders if he can have a route back into power, essentially, and work back into Downing Street with those two. But like I said, I think it's a brave man who gives him a job, personally.
Now, were you at the wedding? The secret wedding? Were you invited?
Not at all, no. Not
Where
at all.
did that come from? It was a masterstroke of secrecy. The media didn't get wind of it, and everyone had been led to believe that for some reason they were waiting till next year.
Well, actually, there's quite an interesting understory, as it were, running along this. This is, of course, Carrie Johnson, as she is now known, used to be in a relationship with Harry Cole, who was the editor of, who was the political editor at The Sun. And that story about the wedding taking place in a year or two's time came out via Harry Cole. And so whether or not there's been some deliberate underhand, a man who has now, of course, had to report on his own ex's marriage to the Prime Minister and also simultaneously getting his story wrong, was probably not a great day out for old Harry, who is normally relatively on the mark with things. So yeah, they did keep it incredibly quiet, a supposedly intimate ceremony, but it has caused a lot of controversy, hasn't it? How can a man twice divorced be married in a Catholic church, George? You know, and so apparently what I'm hearing is that but my understanding is that the Catholic Church has decided not to recognise his previous marriages, which I think is quite convenient, isn't it?
Yes, but the real reason is because for the first time in our history, because of course we've only had prime ministers for a couple of centuries, 2.5, we've got a Catholic prime minister.
Yeah.
That's something that we never thought we might see in this period.
I didn't realise he was Catholic. I've got to be honest with you. I just didn't. And I'm assuming as well he might be able to claim some kind of Greek Orthodox lineage or something even like that as well with his family history. But
Turkish. He was a Catholic. He was a Catholic at school, and then he defected. He's quite, how shall I say, promiscuous, Boris Johnson, in religious matters and others. He became an Anglican. And then when he met Carrie, who is a Catholic, he converted back again. And the church has forgiven that promiscuity and other things precisely because Britain has, in 2021, a Catholic Prime Minister, when the US had its first Catholic president in 1960, 61 years ago. Has that caused any frisson in conservative circles?
So I spoke to Peter Bone earlier today, actually, and he was just quite confused. Now, what I do find very interesting is there's two different noises coming out amongst Conservative MPs. There's what you're getting on Twitter and what you're getting online, which is warm wishes. We wish them well. We're so delighted for you. What a fabulous couple. Nothing is ever going to go wrong here. And then you have behind the scenes, which is actually people already sniffling a little bit and saying, there's no way this is going to last. How come they've ended up in this situation? Is it a case where Boris has maybe been a little bit of a silly boy and perhaps has got himself into a situation where it's really the right thing for the country and for the dignity of his office, if you could call it that actually he should be in a committed marriage, essentially, with an individual. So that seems to be the two different mood musics among Conservative MPs. The actual Catholicism element to it, I've certainly not heard anything along those lines, apart from just genuine confusion as to how he was able to actually get married in a Catholic church, yeah.
It's just, if you look at Joshua Rosenberg's legal blog, you'll see a long list of things that the Prime Minister will not now be legally able to do, like nominating bishops and so on, and many other things, because British law still forbids Roman Catholics from doing these things, having these powers, like being in the royal family, for example. If you're a Catholic marrying into the royal family, if you were of a mind, you'd probably be best advised not to, but if you were, you would have to relinquish your faith in order to do so. So it is a bit of a historic event.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it is definitely a historic event. I like the idea now that Boris, who's probably had a little bit too much on his plate for quite a while, could hide behind the Catholicism excuse now to essentially do a bit less work. I do wonder if that was on his mind at all. But no, I think it's definitely historic in that sense, and it's also, I think, just probably the right thing for the country and for Boris Johnson to have actually done. I think the question marks are just over. Really, I don't think that Carrie is particularly popular behind the scenes. She isn't really particularly popular behind the scenes amongst staff in Downing Street and amongst fellow Conservative MPs. For some reason, whether or not this is unfair, it may well be unfair, she is treated with an element of scepticism. She's seen as wanting to adopt causes that are not regarded as being particularly positive amongst the Conservative base, environmentalism being one of those. And there are concerns about how much of Boris's ear she has, for want of a better phrase. You would imagine now quite a lot. And so there are concerns over that. And there also are concerns coupled with that about whether or not Boris is fundamentally quite a weak man when it comes to women, and whether or not she does have an undue influence over him. That said, I suppose any man is going to listen to his wife at some point, isn't he? So you could argue that that's reasonable. So yeah, there is some suspicion with Carrie, and I think as well. Look, Dominic Cummings. I know we started talking about Cummings, and it's fitting that we should kind of come full circle in this sense, really, because he did crown her Princess Nut-Nut, which I think is incredibly derogatory, don't get me wrong, but then did reference in the inquest, in the inquiry that he was part of, a situation where we were about to announce that we were going to throw everyone into full lockdown. It was that day. Donald Trump wanted to join a bombing campaign in Iraq, and Carrie Simons got the Downing Street press office to focus entirely, pretty much, on a story in the Times about whether or not she was going to give Dylan the dog away. And I think that does maybe show where some issues could emerge behind the scenes vis-a-vis Carrie and Boris.
Well, we'll keep a close eye on it, thanks to you. Patrick Christys, thanks for joining us on board the mother of all talk shows. Let's go to Simon in Preston on UFOs. Go ahead, Simon.
About UFOs, I'm just ringing to give my 2 pence on intelligent life in the universe.
Yeah, go ahead. So to me, you're right. I shouldn't have put it the way I did. Go ahead.
No, No, it's fine. So my view is very much from a scientific point of view that, it's never aliens until it's aliens. And the old adage of extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. And certainly to my mind and all the evidence that I've seen, there is absolutely no evidence to date that any of the so-called sightings of alien life and alien transport are anything more than just, as the scientist you had on before was saying, that are just digital remnants, that are on a camera screen. You very often hear them saying, "Oh, it's moving at hundreds of thousands, well, let's say thousands of miles an hour, and I can see it on my screen, but there's no radar contact." Well, that's because it just doesn't actually exist. That's why there's no radar contact.
Well, there could be, but it could be being covered up. Isn't that the point, Simon? And isn't that what we're beginning to see break down now in the United States? Because according to Obama, there is lots of evidence of extraordinary things, unexplained things, but they just don't release that to the public for obvious reasons.
Yeah, there's lots of things in the world. People do things, don't they? That you say, why on earth would they have done that? It's completely unexplainable. Doesn't mean to say it didn't happen or that it did. It's just, these things are just, a lot of them are just as fanciful. Anyway, what I was going to say as well was a little bit more is that in terms of the distance to other stars where there are potentially other planets around. Within 100 light years of the Earth, there is only 800 stars. So there's not necessarily going to be that many planets. And if you imagine that we've been transmitting at the very most electronic signals for 100 years, then it can't have got more than, it can't have got further than those 800 stars, what we've transmitted. And likewise, signals can't have got to us from...
Well, that depends. Our electronic signals might be much weaker than any extraterrestrial life.
Oh, that's irrelevant. The fastest that anything can travel is the speed of light. And electronic signals,
that's if you're a human on Earth. That's if you're a human on Earth.
No, it's a view of physics in the universe.
But that's the point that was being made by Pope. That you have to imagine a new physics.
But you'll only get new physics in the new universe. And there is actually science behind that. There are more things in heaven and earth
than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. You mustn't imagine that life has to look like us. Even going back to Professor Cronin, that life is formed biologically at all.
I'm absolutely sure that it doesn't look like us, George, but I'm absolutely sure that it conforms to the rules of physics in our universe.
Well, the rules as defined by us from here in our universe. These craft can be coming from not even necessarily in our solar system. They can be coming from distant solar systems where a different physics may exist.
No. There's no other physics than what the physics we know in the universe. That's what makes it. There are things about physics in our universe that we don't yet understand, such as dark matter and dark energy.
Dark matter, dark energy, black holes. These are all potentially game-changing, script-changing, physics-changing phenomena.
They are, but there's no evidence for them at the moment for translating that into
the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Simon. But going back to my previous point, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Sure.
I mean, I could make any claim. It doesn't mean to say that it's true.
No, that's obviously the case. But I like to employ a certain logical test. And it's this. What would be the reason for all of this universe to exist, but only one really rather insignificant planet to have ever had any form of life on it. That sounds illogical to me.
I absolutely agree with you, George. And I really want it to be aliens. But until it's aliens, it's not aliens.
Okay.
In actual fact, I don't know if you've seen the film Contact, actually, because there you said the same line that you just made, and it was amazing. It is an awful waste of space if we are all that there is.
If we're all that there is. Exactly. Thanks, Simon. I've enjoyed that call. Michael is the last caller. Maybe. No, we might get another one in. Michael in Minneapolis on Bernie Sanders and U.S. politics. Go ahead, Michael.
Hey, George. How are you doing today?
Good. I've enjoyed the show. I hope you have.
Absolutely. So I just want to talk about sort of where the Democratic Party is and what they're doing right now. So, you know, during when Joe Biden passed the COVID relief bill, he abandoned several campaign promises, and with no opposition from, you know, the progressives in Congress, Bernie or the squad. He refused to put in a $15 minimum wage, which, as you remember, in that last one-to-one debate back in March with Joe Biden, Joe Biden absolutely unequivocally promised he would go to the mat for a $15 minimum wage. Well, that didn't happen. We didn't get any rent or mortgage relief. We didn't get any sort of expanded stimulus. We didn't get anything really for small business owners. And then this past week, they debated on a bill to increase Capitol police budget by nearly $2 billion with a B dollars. And you've got to remember, you know, after George Floyd and everything and all the protests of last summer, the squad was banging the drum for, you know, defund the police. They need to, you know, reform the police, and we can't put so much money into it. And, you know, that was a huge thing that they were very focused on, and that the progressive young base of this country that was out in the streets marching was focused on. And this past week, when it came, though, to vote for themselves, so they're talking about defunding the police for other people, but when it came to themselves, three of them, you know, it was a party line vote.
Perhaps they just want to get re-elected, Michael. Anyone who would be found to have actually defunded the police would be electorally radioactive.
Well, that's one thing, George, but we're talking about the Capitol Police. So this is just in Washington, D.C. So 3 members of the squad voted no, which is what they had said they would do. But then 3 of them, including Jamal Bowman and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib, all voted present. So their rhetoric has been, let's, you know, defund the police. But when it came to themselves, they voted for a $2 billion increase to the Capitol Police. That's just in Washington, D.C., which will also make
for one police force.
For one police force.
$2 billion extra.
Yeah, $2 billion additional funding, which is going to make the Capitol less accessible to the general public, and also increases sort of the surveillance state's, oversight into it. And it's just unbelievable hypocrisy for them. It passed George by 1 vote, 213 to 212. Wow. So if any of the 3 had voted against it, it would have gone down. And, you know, I don't think, yes, the Capitol Police, should they stop people from rioting the Capitol? Sure, but that wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't that there weren't enough police. The issue was that they weren't tossed into action because, frankly, Donald Trump wasn't that upset about the Capitol, protest riot. So they don't need any more money, but it's just the hypocrisy is just this. And, at the same time, they're not taking a stand for anything. I guess that's why I'm so worked up and frustrated, is because America's falling apart. We desperately need all that kind of COVID relief that we just haven't gotten. And what they're focused on is let's increase money for the Capitol Police Force. And they're talking about how they want to investigate the Capitol riots on the 6th, like it's the most important thing that ever happened.
Yeah,
You've got a country that's been suffering for a year and a half.
An insurrection, don't you know? Michael, thank you very much indeed for that call. Samuel is in New York. Go ahead, Samuel.
Hello, George. It's an honor to speak to you. I started first hearing you on WBAI here in New York. And
that was also called the mother of all talk shows. Well remembered.
Yes. and I've been a follower ever since. I also was listening to your speech and a couple of your speeches at the Oxford Union. The one that's on YouTube, where the student asks you, "Are you a racist?" and then you give him a great answer. Yeah. You said that you would never debate a supporter of Israeli apartheid. Yeah. How does that relate in your mind to what we've just seen, the horrible incidents in Gaza today, recently?
Well, I discuss with Israelis all the time. In fact, Gideon Levy, whom I call the greatest living Israeli, is a regular guest on the show, a journalist from Haaretz who supports justice and humanity in Israel. But having been an activist in the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, if you'd asked me back when Mandela was in jail and apartheid was standing on the necks of the majority population in South Africa, to have a gentlemanly, scholarly student union debate with a supporter of that system, I would have refused. And if that's so, how can I justify a scholarly student debate with a supporter of apartheid in Israel-Palestine? I can't. But that's not to say I don't talk to Israelis. I do all the time. Some of my best friends, as they say, are Israelis, but they're not supporters of what is happening to the Palestinian people. That's the difference, Sam.
Yes. I really, really appreciate your answer, George, and I just hope that I could follow in your footsteps in the future.
God bless you. Thank you for the call. Gerard in Kilwinning is definitely the last call. Gerard, go ahead.
Yes, George, listen, if you want another job, the Celtic manager job's still going, so...
Haven't they got an Australian guy for that?
Oh, God, I don't know, George. Apparently he's some guy who's worked in Japan and Australia.
I've never heard of him, I must say.
I've never heard of him, but... I'm
not big on Australian coaches working in Japan, but it doesn't fill me with great excitement, Gerard.
Maybe we should have Keir Starmer's job, George. I don't think he could do much worse for Celtic as he's doing for Labour.
I wouldn't wish that on any football team, certainly not Celtic. It is a terrible mess, Labour and Celtic.
It really is, George. And the thing about Starmer, look, I'm not going to hold him responsible for everything. This goes back, you mentioned, you touched on Iraq, you go all the way back to there when guys like you and the late, great Robin Cook stood up and said no to this monstrosity that's took place. But you go back to even Jeremy Corbyn, from the day he got in the door, the Blairites, the right-wingers, were campaigning against them. They were trying to stab him in the back immediately. And the country saw this, and the people saw this, and they thought, wait a minute, if you're not even going to stand by your own leader, who the party, the people of your party elected, why in God's name are you going to stand up for us? They don't trust the Labour Party, no, and they don't see this, George. The Labour elites don't understand that the way they treated Jeremy Corbyn is going to haunt them for a long time to come.
Yes, that's right. Jeremy Corbyn, of course, himself also made many mistakes, but it is important to remember that notwithstanding 2 whole years of insurrection against their own leader, Corbyn got the best Labour vote, the biggest increase in the Labour vote since 1945 at the general election in 2017. Corbyn, but for less than 3,500 votes, would have been the Prime Minister of Britain.
Exactly, and he was actually the antithesis of Tony Blair and your David Miliband's and your Mandelsons and all these other characters who, when Labour, they just used Labour for their own agenda.
They're anti-Labour. They're anti-Labour.
Exactly.
Starmer must go. The Australian coach. Well, I don't know what to say. I don't want to be disloyal. I've got a...
Hail, anyway.
Thanks, hail to you, Gerard, in Kilwinning, in Ayrshire, in Scotland. Only one Scottish call today. Time was when all the calls were Scottish. but we have toured the American continent from Brazil to Canada. And it's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you, and if it was, come back next week at the same time, same place, for the mother of all talk shows. Good night.